Chapter 11:19. The decaying old man looked at Yi Tianyun. He didn't know where Yi Tianyun got his confidence from, but he wasn't surprised. It's good to be confident, but you can't be too full of yourself. Basically all the people who came here said the same thing. In the end, they couldn't find the dish I wanted to eat, and some people even tried to attack me. The decaying old man coldly snorted. Anyone who tried to attack me would be severely punished. I hope you won't do such a thing. If you want to become my master, you'll have to show me some skill. The decaying old man didn't say what those people thought. He was definitely very strict. If they felt that they couldn't pass, they would try to see if they could control it. As long as they could suppress the artifact's spirit, they could indeed forcefully become the master. But the difficulty was higher, and it varied from person to person. Yi Tianyun felt that those people were all idiots. This was an Empyrean's treasure, how could it be so easily controlled? Unless it was a weaker artifact spirit, such a powerful existence couldn't be easily controlled. I'm not being arrogant, I just feel that I have the ability. Yi Tianyun sat down to the side and began to think. He wanted to see if there was anything that matched this taste. A sweet and sour taste. Yi Tianyun closed his eyes in thought. The undying old man sat to the side, slowly drinking his tea. He didn't say anything. In any case, he had enough time. He didn't need to worry about time. Is it that kind of thing? Yi Tianyun opened his eyes, and 2 rays of light burst out from his eyes. Then he quickly stood up and began to search for spirit herbs nearby. He easily picked out 2 kinds of spirit herbs without spending any time at all. The decaying old man saw that he had only found 2 spirit herbs nearby and had already brought them to the table. He was startled. Just 2 spirit herbs. That's right, just 2 spirit herbs. Spirit herbs don't taste good just because you have more. And now, I only need these 2 spirit herbs to answer your question. That's more than enough. Yi Tianyun only brought 2 kinds of spirit medicine, no more and no less, just 2 kinds of spirit medicine. The decaying old man looked at the 2 spirit herbs and said, there shouldn't only be 2 kinds of spirit herbs, but it's fine. Since we failed, let's keep looking. Yi Tianyun ignored him. He simply threw the 2 spirit herbs into the air and began to refine them with his flames. It was similar to alchemy, just not as crude. Under Yi Tianyun's meticulous refinement, the liquid refined from the 2 spirit herbs gradually became thicker and more solid. At the same time, a sweet and sour smell wafted out from the air, completely cooking the essence of the 2 elixirs. The sweet and sour taste produced a kind of aroma that made people reminisce about it. Smelling this fragrance, the decaying old man couldn't help but shout, too similar. It's really too similar to this fragrance. This is impossible. What he didn't believe was that these 2 ordinary spirit herbs could actually cook the fragrance that he was familiar with. After so many years, he could finally smell this fragrance. Yi Tianyun didn't answer. After a while, he poured the half-liquid, half-solid thick substance into the plate. In the process, when the thick liquid slid down, it pulled out long thin threads, looking crystal clear. Then, Yi Tianyun immediately used the netherworld flame. The cold air cooled the thick substance quickly, but it looked soft, like syrup, spreading around the plate. It's done. You can taste it. This should be the taste you want. Yi Tianyun smiled. The decaying old man couldn't wait to take the chopsticks. When he put them into the plate, the thing immediately stuck to the chopsticks. Under his pull, it pulled out long threads. When he put it in his mouth, the sweet and sour taste filled his taste buds. The soft and syrup-like sweet taste danced on the tip of his tongue. No, it's still missing a little. The decaying old man shook his head, but his eyes shone with a strange light. Is that so? Just a little bit more. Let's try this material. Yi Tianyun quickly switched to another spirit fruit. In fact, these were not high-grade spirit fruits. The basic taste was sweet and sour, a little similar to hawthorn. When the corresponding taste was locked on, the range would be greatly reduced. Therefore, he didn't need too many materials to find the corresponding taste. Although he didn't succeed on the first try, he immediately hit a similar taste. This undoubtedly proved that his choice was right. Soon, he was done. From the appearance, it could be said that it was almost identical. The decaying old man couldn't wait to try it, but then he shook his head and said, "It's not this one. It's still missing a little, then let's change to this." Tianyun tried again and again. He had roughly a dozen similar tastes on hand, so he only needed to try a dozen times to be able to see the effect. Finally, when he was done and fed it to the decaying old man, his body stiffened. It's this texture, it's this taste. I haven't tasted it for so many years, it's really been so many years. The old man's eyes reddened in an instant, and tears flowed from the corners of his eyes and slid down his cheeks. It wasn't that this dish was delicious, but that it made him remember all sorts of things in the past. It seems that you like Master very much and treat him like a father, right? In order to preserve this memory, you have to imitate him, be it in terms of appearance or voice. Tianyun picked up the cup of tea and sighed. Even this tea, I have to learn to taste it and get used to it. But at your current age, you won't be able to get used to it. If you don't like him, then you don't like him. Why force yourself? He reached out to touch the decaying old man's head and sighed. You should also let it go. Memories are beautiful, but you only need to remember them in your heart, there's no need to show them. The reason why your master made this sweet and sour candy was to make you happy. The decaying old man stared blankly at Tianyun, tears falling continuously. His small mouth was open, but he couldn't say a single word. Tianyun reached out and gently pulled the white eyebrows, white beard, and white hair off the decaying old man's face. These could all be easily removed, and replaced with light green eyebrows, green hair, and a face that looked like a teenage girl. The artifact spirit of this treasure had the appearance of a 13 or 14-year-old little girl, and was still a bit childish. Those white eyebrows were all for decoration. This was the true appearance of the decaying old man. The previous master was able to make this snack because the artifact spirit was just a child. What she liked was not the bitter taste of tea, nor the extremely rich taste of meat, but the sweet and sour taste, which was what children liked the most. Father. The decaying old man threw himself into Tianyun's arms. The black robe draped over his body fell off, and what replaced it was a long green dress full of youthfulness. Chapter 11:20. Hua Su threw himself into Tianyun's arms and cried, which made Tianyun feel emotional. He knew that this artifact spirit had lived for a long time, at least a few thousand years, maybe even 10,000 years, but her temperament was no different from that of a child. What she liked was that taste, and even more so, that memory. Her feelings for her first master were the deepest. After all, it was her first master who created decay's space that gave birth to an artifact spirit. After Tianyun came in, he had already determined from all aspects that this decay was pretending to be an old man. After all, she was too short, and her skin was too soft. Whether it was her lips or her eyes, they were not something an old man should have. He believed that the suitable candidates who had come in before should have noticed this. However, in this space, as long as she didn't want anyone to touch her, no one could touch her. In this space, she was a god. Judging from Hua Xiu's real situation, the dish that Hua Xiu was talking about easily made him think of this. Because of this, she made this snack, sweet and sour candied haws, which children loved to eat. Artifact spirits who had just gained sentience also loved to eat these things. As long as he put it together, it wasn't hard to figure out what the answer was. And it just so happened that the ingredients he wanted were here. A person who loved to remember would definitely preserve the changes in her surroundings. The rattan table and chairs, as well as the surrounding vegetation, were all carefully preserved. He believed that decay really didn't know what it was made of. An artifact spirit was an artifact spirit after all. You're not my father. Suddenly, Decay jumped out of Yi Tianyun's arms and stared at Yi Tianyun with red eyes. Yi Tianyun spread his hands and said helplessly, "Of course I'm not your father. I'm your second master." He wasn't Decay's father in the first place. It was just that Decay had felt something just now and directly pounced on him to vent. Decay said unhappily, "I still haven't admitted that you're my new master." She reached out to wipe away the tears in her eyes. Her mood seemed to have recovered quite a bit. Yi Tianyun smiled faintly and said, "You said that you only needed to make a dish that satisfied you. Could it be that you are not satisfied with this dish? If you're not satisfied, I can make more flavors for you to eat, but the taste will be different from the original." Hua Huang was silent for a moment. He spun around on the spot and suddenly smiled. "Then tell me, why can you tell what I like to eat?" Yi Tianyun smiled and said, "From their age, we can tell that the younger the child, the more they like this kind of taste. Even if I can't determine it for the time being, I'll be able to find it after trying a few more times. As long as I'm careful, it's not difficult to find it." He pouted and said unhappily, "I've already lived for tens of thousands of years, and you actually say I'm a child. In front of me, you are just a child." Yi Tianyun said indifferently. "Fine, you old monster." Hua Huang didn't linger on this question. He smiled again and said, "There are so many suitable people, and they can't make it. You can make it when you just came in." They looked for a long time, but they couldn't find a suitable one. You were just by the side, and you found it. Do you think they are fools? If the previous trial takers knew about this, they would definitely be so angry that they would come back to life. Who would have thought that the relatively ordinary spirit herbs and spirit fruits around were the key points of the question? It was true that the simpler something was, the more complicated it seemed, the more difficult it became. This was all a problem of mentality. They all thought that Hua Huang would give a very difficult question, and the dishes she said were all very difficult and delicious. Who would have thought that it was just a snack that ordinary children often ate? It was just that Hua Huang didn't describe it clearly. He didn't know what it was, so he couldn't guess it no matter how hard he thought. "I'm not a fool. It's just that your description is unclear. If you had said it clearly, I would have made it long ago." Yi Tianyun smiled. If he knew the ingredients, any cultivator could make it. Although he wasn't a chef, if he had good control, he could still make it. His eyes, which were like rotten emeralds, turned around and smiled. "All right, you pass. You're quite capable. You've already made dishes that I'm satisfied with. You have the right to be my master." Yi Tianyun finally heaved a sigh of relief. Whether he could pass the test and complete one of the tests of the path of the Celestial Lord depended on her golden mouth. Now that she said there was no problem, it meant that she had finally passed. Then, a beam of light enveloped him, which meant that the spirit had begun to recognize him as its master. In just a moment, Hua Huang easily recognized him as its master. Originally, it wasn't difficult to recognize him as its master. It only needed a few seconds. The difficult part was whether the spirit was willing to recognize him as its master. Master. After Hua Huang finished recognizing him as its master, her attitude became much more respectful. "Hua Huang, this name sounds weird. Don't you have another name?" Yi Tianyun asked. "I don't." Hua Huang shook her head. "You're a girl. The name Hua Huang doesn't suit you at all. Why don't I give you another name?" Yi Tianyun said. Okay. I also think that this name is too cliché. I wonder what name Master will give me." Hua Huang's eyes brightened. She also thought that this name was a bit unpleasant. "Then I'll call you Cui Cui. What do you think?" Yi Tianyun thought of a simple name. Cui Cui. Sounds okay. Cui Cui thought about it seriously. Then, she clapped her hands and smiled. "Then I'll call you Cui Cui. It sounds good. It sounds much better than Hua Huang. Now that I've become your master, can you tell me why Elder did this?" Yi Tianyun asked. Cui Cui thought about it and said, this is very simple. You just have to walk to the end and complete the final test. Then, you'll know what father is thinking. He left something on the top, but we don't know what it is. Only after you pass it will you know what it is. You don't know. Yi Tianyun shook his head. Your previous master really wasn't responsible enough. He didn't tell you anything and just let you recognize a suitable master. Isn't that a bit too hasty? Especially if you don't pass it in the end, wouldn't he still be able to take you away? We don't know about that. It's all father's orders. We can only follow them. Cui Cui shook her head. She didn't know what he meant at all. All right then. I'll know what's going on when I go there myself. Yi Tianyun could only go there himself to find out what was going on. Chapter 11:21. With Tsuetsue's help, he quickly returned to the surface. When he returned to his body, he felt that everything was perfect. There was a special jade bracelet on his hand. Without a doubt, this was Tsuetsue's real body. This treasure was called the Rotting Jade Bracelet. It was a very simple name. It was a mid-grade heavenly Dao treasure, but its grade was actually quite average. Although it was a heavenly path treasure, it would be beneath a heavenly venerate to use a mid-grade heavenly path treasure. However, these treasures all had artifact spirits, so their significance was different. Artifact spirits could be slowly nurtured. Once they were strong enough, there was a certain chance that they could advance. To put it bluntly, Tsuetsue could become a high-grade heavenly path treasure. However, it would take a long time to nurture it before it could advance. Overall, it was still very precious. A mid-grade heavenly path treasure with an artifact spirit was better than a high-grade heavenly path treasure without an artifact spirit. This meant that once it was upgraded to a high-grade heavenly path treasure, its effect would far surpass that of a high-grade heavenly path treasure without an artifact spirit. Of course, to him, the most valuable thing was the effect. The effect was very good. It could upgrade a spirit herb's grade or restore a withered spirit herb. This effect was undoubtedly the most valuable. Still haven't passed. Yi Tianyun looked up and saw that the Divine Emperor Yuqin was still in the middle of the test. This time, he was a little faster than the Divine Emperor Yuqin. He could only say that he had just guessed it. If it were anyone else, they would have failed. Then, he walked toward the finish line. He wanted to know what it meant to be a heavenly master. Many things could not be built casually. They must have their own meaning. What was the situation in the heavenly pilfering sacred land? As long as he finished this path, everything would become clear. As he walked, the cultivators behind him exclaimed. They did not expect that Yi Tianyun had passed the test and was walking toward the finish line. He's faster than the Lord of Heaven. He's even faster than the Lord of Heaven. That's too fast. I feel like it's only been a few days and he's already passed the second to last stage. That means he already has a chance to reach the finish line. Heavens, a human ascending to the top, this is something that has never happened before. They were all stunned. Initially, they thought that Yi Tianyun would fall behind the Divine Emperor Yuqin. But now, it seemed like he was even faster than the Divine Emperor Yuqin. Junior brother Tianyun is really amazing. He broke it so quickly. Look at the Lord of Heaven in the clouds. He hasn't woken up yet. He brought this upon himself. The Lord of Heaven's poisonous tongue came out again. He couldn't help but mock the Lord of Heaven in the clouds. That's his own business. It seems like our heavenly spring divine realm is about to change. The purple-crowned Lord of Heaven shook his head and said, although he wasn't the first to reach the top, a human reaching the end alone would definitely cause a huge uproar. The reason why Elder Go Huang sent Yi Tianyun over was purely for him to cultivate. It would be enough if he could break through to the 9th refinement Earth Monarch realm. Now, he had achieved it and could even reach the end of the heavenly venerate path. This was definitely beyond his expectations. It was something he had never thought of. How was it possible to complete the heavenly venerate path in a few months? But Tianyun often turned the impossible into the absolutely possible. Moreover, he still had a lot of time. The 2 jade pendants that he had plundered could allow him to stay for a while longer. He walked forward bit by bit. This time, his speed wasn't fast. It wasn't that he didn't want to go fast, but he felt that the further he went, the more shocking the pressure became. He felt the pressure of a heavenly venerate, which was starting to pressure him, making it slightly more difficult for him to move forward. Every step he took felt like he was walking on top of a mountain. It was more like he was being slapped down by someone. The pressure of a heavenly venerate is really shocking. I guess this is only a small part of it. Tianyun felt the pressure and suddenly felt that the power of a heavenly venerate was really strong. This world was really powerful. He thought he could stand at the peak, but who knew that there was an even higher peak waiting for him to climb? I didn't expect you to be faster than me. The voice of the divine emperor Yuqin came from behind. Tianyun turned his head and saw that the divine emperor Yuqin was holding a jade bracelet in his hand. It seemed that this heavenly venerate liked to make accessories. Otherwise, he wouldn't be making bracelets. I'm just a little faster than you. Tianyun shrugged. The divine emperor Yuqin was extremely displeased. A little faster? This is my second time here, and it was the same test. I didn't expect you to be faster than me. She felt that it was incredible. She thought that she was already fast enough. She didn't expect that Tianyun was even faster than her. My luck was good. I chose a relatively easy stage, so I easily passed. Tianyun shrugged, too lazy to explain to her. How could it be easy? I'm very suspicious now. Are you the reincarnation of some powerful being? Although I can't feel your aura, it's still very possible. The divine emperor Yuqin felt that Tianyun must be the reincarnation of some powerful being. Otherwise, how could he pass so easily? If you say so, then so be it. Tianyun simply admitted it and walked forward. You bastard! The divine emperor Yuqin gritted her teeth and chased after them. Her speed was not fast. Just like Tianyun, she was also under the pressure of this heavenly venerate. Seeing that the 2 of them continued to climb, everyone looked at them with envy. It seemed that 2 of them would soon reach the top. They, on the other hand, still had a long way to go before they could reach the foot of the mountain. The 2 of them walked up step by step. This time, they were not affected by any illusions. They were simply feeling the pressure of this heavenly venerate. Tianyun didn't know what it meant. All he knew was that the higher he climbed, the more experience he would gain. If he continued like this, he would be able to satisfy the experience needed to level up. Although the conditions to break through to the 10th refinement Earth Lord were not enough, to him, he had to satisfy the conditions in terms of experience first. After the experience was satisfied, the rest would be easier. The last part of the road was not far. It was only half a kilometer away. They walked up step by step with great difficulty. It took a long time before they could take a step forward. Originally, they spent very little time at the front, but now they spent more time here. Sometimes, it would take a few days to walk 100 meters. It far exceeded the time they spent before. But as time passed, Tianyun felt that under this pressure, his body began to be contaminated with a special kind of energy. It seeped into his body and strengthened his physique. This is the power of a heavenly venerate. Chapter 11:22. The power of a heavenly venerate. It was the power of a heavenly venerate. It was actually being transmitted into their bodies. This feeling reminded him of the god-killing pagoda from a long time ago. It was using their energy to enter and then possess a body. However, Tianyun felt that the 2 were not the same. The surging power of a heavenly venerate was not the kind of evil energy, but a kind of good energy. It was for them to comprehend this energy. If they did not comprehend it, the final result would be dissipating. After all, this heavenly venerate power did not belong to them. At their current stage, they could not store it in their bodies forever. They could only feel it now. At most, it would strengthen their physique slightly. The other effects were not great. This is Father's aura. It is so familiar. Tsuetsue's voice sounded in his mind. As an artifact spirit, she could naturally communicate with him. Yes, I guess your father wants us to feel this heavenly venerate power and comprehend something from it. Yi Tianyun closed his eyes and walked forward step by step. He carefully comprehended this heavenly venerate power. Beside him, the divine Emperor Yuqin also carefully comprehended. Just like him, she closed her eyes to comprehend. As a divine lord, she naturally knew how precious this energy was. If she comprehended it properly, she would be able to have a breakthrough in her comprehension. Previously, she was stuck at this divine lord level. If she comprehended it carefully, she might be able to have a breakthrough. She came here to break through. Not every heavenly venerate was as generous as this heavenly venerate, allowing others to comprehend their energy. Very quickly, Yi Tianyun discovered that he could not continue forward. He was stuck at the bottom. It was like there was an invisible wall in front of him, blocking him and not letting him go forward. This is a restriction. Yi Tianyun sized up the invisible wall. He reached out and patted it. It felt so hard that he could not take half a step forward. Sir God Yuqin, who was walking over, also felt the invisible wall, which made her feel very strange. Why is there a restriction? Yi Tianyun was very puzzled. The end was clearly in front, less than 100 meters away. But now there was a restriction blocking here. Master, you haven't comprehended Daddy's energy. You won't be able to pass. Cui Cui's voice rang out. Yi Tianyun stared in shock. Only now did he realize what this meant. If he wanted to pass through this place, he would need to gain enlightenment of the power of an Empyrean. Only then would he be able to pass through the restrictive spells. Comprehending the power of an Empyrean was like grasping a key. Otherwise, it would be impossible to pass through here. If you want to pass through this place, you'll need to comprehend this power. Only then will you be able to successfully pass through. So, comprehend it well, reminded the divine Emperor Yuqin. Yi Tianyun turned his head. The divine Emperor Yuqin was kind enough to remind him several times. Although he already knew, he had to admit that it was good to be able to remind the other party. Thank you for the reminder. Yi Tianyun thanked him. I've already reminded you. Why don't you repay me and tell me about your situation? The divine Emperor Yuqin was still chasing after Yi Tianyun. He wanted to know how Yi Tianyun had passed through so easily. Yi Tianyun's head was about to explode from the questions. The divine Emperor Yuqin was really persistent. He kept asking again and again. Didn't I say that I was lucky and knew how to pass through the test? Otherwise, I would have been stuck there. Yi Tianyun stretched out his hand and patted the jade bangle in his hand. Cui Cui, tell her if it's like this. Cui Cui transformed into a mini body and landed on Yi Tianyun's shoulder. She looked at the divine Emperor Yuqin and pursed her lips. That's right. He encountered it by accident and then solved it. The divine Emperor Yuqin looked at the item spirit on Yi Tianyun's shoulder and said with dissatisfaction, I thought you didn't have an item spirit. So it turns out that you do have an item spirit. I can't believe I reminded you. She had already believed most of it. Item spirits wouldn't lie. The treasure of a celestial master is definitely not simple. Isn't it normal to have an item spirit? Yi Tianyun rolled his eyes at her. Now you finally believe me, right? You solved it by accident. I really don't know what to say about you. The divine Emperor Yuqin patted his head. He had spent 2 lives to solve this riddle. Yi Tianyun solved it by accident. It had to be said that luck played a big part in it. If you don't know how to say it, then don't say it. Now, be obedient and solve it. You will need to use your jade pendant here. Yi Tianyun said. He would need to continue using his jade pendant here, just like before. Unless he entered a special test, he would still need to use his jade pendant. My jade pendant can last for 5 months. You don't have to worry. The Divine Emperor Yuqin said, I just don't know if you can endure it. If you can't, just go down and kill a few cultivators and snatch your jade pendant. Yi Tianyun sucked in a breath of cold air. This guy was really simple and crude. His suggestion was accurate, but it was a little too deceptive. If he really did that, he wouldn't be able to establish himself in the heavenly spring god realm. The Divine Emperor Yuqin wasn't afraid. He was a grade 3 god realm cultivator. A grade 2 god realm cultivator's pursuit was nothing to him. Forget it. I should have enough. Yi Tianyun didn't say much to her. He directly sat down to comprehend the Heavenly Venerate's power. He peeled off the Heavenly Venerate's power bit by bit and began to read the corresponding information. The Divine Emperor Yuqin also sat down to comprehend. Comprehending the Heavenly Venerate's power wasn't difficult for them. They just needed a little more time and they would be able to comprehend it. While Yi Tianyun was comprehending, he was immediately immersed in the Heavenly Venerate's power. Days passed, and many people's time was up. They could only choose to leave. They could only come again after accumulating enough contribution points. Thus, they left reluctantly. If they didn't leave, only death awaited them. Fortunately, the Lord of Heaven had woken up. However, the jade pendant situation had reached its peak. When he saw Yi Tianyun and the Divine Emperor Yuqin sitting at the peak, his face turned ugly. He didn't expect that when he woke up, Yi Tianyun had already left him far behind. It would take him a long time to catch up. You little brat, just you wait. The Lord of Heaven glared at Yi Tianyun before turning and flying away. In the blink of an eye, more than a month had passed. Yi Tianyun slowly opened his eyes. A golden light shot out from his eyes, as if it could see through everything. I've finally comprehended it. Yi Tianyun stood up and took a step forward. He easily passed through the restriction and stepped into the final region. Chapter 1123. Yi Tianyun was faster than the Divine Emperor Yuqin by a notch. He had already been faster than him once before. No one expected that he would continue to be in the lead this time, causing everyone to be shocked. No one expected that he would surpass the Divine Emperor Yuqin time and time again. They originally thought that when the Divine Emperor Yuqin came, he would be able to ruthlessly suppress this human's arrogance. But now it seems that they were too naive. Yi Tianyun was still able to be one step ahead of them, moving forward at an even faster speed. The reason why he could be so fast was naturally because of the appraisal eye. But the data was simply too huge, and analyzing it was extremely taxing. This caused him to spend a full month before he was able to analyze the Heavenly Venerable's power. After thoroughly analyzing it, he began to be able to mobilize the Heavenly Venerable's power here. Although it was minuscule, it already gave him the qualifications to control the Heavenly Venerable's power. He did not know why he was doing this, but being able to control the Heavenly Venerable's power in advance was indeed equivalent to taking a small step towards the Heavenly Venerable level. At least he had the qualifications to control it. As for the Divine Emperor Yuqin, he was still bitterly comprehending it. It was not that her comprehension was too weak, but Yi Tianyun's appraisal eye was too strong, it was simply like cheating. If Yi Tianyun were to upgrade the appraisal eye, it would definitely be able to greatly strengthen it. After all, the current appraisal eye had already evolved to the point where it could analyze all kinds of medicinal pills, all kinds of martial arts existences, it could be easily and thoroughly analyzed. This was equivalent to those geniuses, just exchanging a few moves with their opponents, they could secretly learn their opponents' moves. Yi Tianyun's talent was slightly worse than theirs. If he were to continue to upgrade it, he would be even stronger than them. Of course, looking at it from an overall perspective, the appraisal eye would definitely crush some geniuses. Master, you're too amazing, you comprehended Daddy's power so quickly. Cui Cui saw that Yi Tianyun passed it so quickly, she was shocked. She knew how amazing the previous master was. To be able to comprehend it so quickly, it was absolutely unprecedented. Is it very amazing? No one comprehended it so quickly in the past. Yi Tianyun asked. No, it would take at least a few years. You are much faster than them. Suitsue sighed. A few years. Yi Tianyun shook his head. If it was a few years, he would have to come here a few more times. However, now that they had reached this step, the god's domain they were in would definitely give them more opportunities to comprehend it. Without waiting for the divine Emperor Yuqin, he lifted his foot and walked towards the finish line. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, he easily entered the final stage. Just as he was about to reach the highest peak, he disappeared from where he was and was teleported away just like that. When he came to his senses, he found himself in a special space. There was a unique courtyard in front of him that looked very exquisite and beautiful. Trial taker. Come on in. A voice rang out from the courtyard. It's father's voice. Suitsue suddenly rushed out and rushed into the courtyard without listening to Yi Tianyun's orders. Actually, she definitely had to listen to Yi Tianyun's orders. It was just that she had her own consciousness, so she could do some things. If Yi Tianyun called for her to come back, she would definitely come back. After he entered, he saw an old man sitting in the pavilion, leisurely drinking tea, as if he had been waiting for him for a long time. Yi Tianyun sized him up. This appearance was similar to the old man that Suitsue had impersonated, but this old man looked more profound. Those eyes were like black holes that could suck him in. Vast Heavenly Sovereign, the divine consciousness of Vast Heavenly Sovereign is not a physical body, but has the power of a divine Lord. It belongs to the master of this space, and can control all life here. The appraisal eye displayed the other party's information. Vast Heavenly Sovereign is indeed a Heavenly Sovereign, but only a trace of his divine consciousness is here. This was not unexpected. The true body of a Heavenly Sovereign would not appear here. Yi Tianyun asked politely, may I know your name, senior? To be able to create this thieving heaven's sacred land, the expert must be a peerless expert of a generation. He knew the other party's name, but he still had to ask politely. Waiting for the other party to say his name was impossible. Just call me Vast Heavenly Sovereign. Vast Heavenly Sovereign reached out and caressed Suitsue's small head. He smiled and said, you were able to pass Suitsue's test, which proves that your ability is extraordinary. What are you still standing there for? Come and sit down. Suitsue stayed by Vast Empyrean's side, pouring tea for him. After Yi Tianyun sat down, the table and chairs looked very ordinary, but when he sat down, he immediately felt very relaxed. He felt like he really wanted to sit here forever, not wanting to leave. Senior, I don't know what your intentions are. For us to walk this heavenly sovereign path, I don't think it's as simple as giving us benefits, right? Yi Tianyun smiled faintly and said, moreover, this thieving heaven's sacred land is not a simple place. If you want to enter, you need these jade pendants to enter. I wonder what is the true purpose of building this place. He asked all of his questions. He wanted to know just what Empyrean Vast Expanse wanted to do. Vast Heavenly Sovereign looked at him with a smile and said, it's very simple, it's to recruit disciples. Other than that, there's no other meaning. He answered very straightforwardly, without hiding anything. Recruit disciples? But you didn't announce it to the public? Yi Tianyun was not surprised. After going through so much trouble to do so many things, it was basically to recruit disciples. He gave treasures and gave such a difficult environment, it was definitely to recruit disciples. The problem was that the people of the outside world did not know at all. They all thought that this was an excellent place to cultivate. There's no need to announce anything. I have always waited for fated people. Vast Heavenly Sovereign smiled and said, those who can climb to the peak are fated people. Senior, didn't 8 cultivators outside successfully pass? Isn't that enough? The 8 names engraved on the outside were all cultivators who had successfully reached the peak. Did an Empyrean need to recruit so many disciples? No, they aren't real disciples, just in-name disciples. If you want to become my disciple, you have to break through to the Empyrean level before you can become my disciple, vast heavenly sovereign said with a smile. Become an Empyrean? Tianyun was speechless. Vast heavenly sovereign was an Empyrean himself. Why did one have to be an Empyrean to become a disciple? Wasn't this a huge loss? Becoming an Empyrean, one should have the qualifications to be on equal footing. Do you think that I am an Empyrean and my disciple is an Empyrean? What else can I teach? Vast heavenly sovereign seemed to see through Tianyun's thoughts and said with a smile, even Empyreans are divided into 3 major realms. Breaking through to Empyrean is merely the beginning. Wanting to reach my level is still far away. Chapter 11:24. Heavenly Venerate Vast Expanse's words were still a little provocative. Heavenly Venerate was also divided into 3 major realms. Wasn't Heavenly Venerate just like the other realms, divided into 10 levels? Tianyun didn't go and ask too much, but this standard to become a disciple was really terrifying enough. He was only an Earth Lord now, and it would take a long time before he could break through to Heavenly Venerate. After all, the experience required was so much, especially now that there was a condition restriction, it was even harder to break through. Unless he broke through to the Lord of Heaven now, but if he really did that, then there wouldn't be any value. Young man, don't be discouraged. You're still young now, and your cultivation has already broken through to the 9 refinements Earth Lord level. It can be said that your future is limitless. No wonder you can comprehend the power of a Heavenly Venerate so quickly. With such decent talent, it's not surprising that you can comprehend it. But I've seen many 9 refinements Earth Lords, but very few can comprehend it so quickly. Some geniuses, when comprehending some powers, will have unique talent. You might be that kind. It wasn't strange for Heavenly Venerate Vast Expanse to see through Tianyun's cultivation at a glance, but his judgment was somewhat wrong. Tianyun being able to comprehend so smoothly was all thanks to the appraisal eye. Many thanks for Senior Vast Expanse's praise. Tianyun thought for a while before asking, "Oh right, Senior Vast Expanse, there's something I wonder if I can ask?" "What don't you understand? Feel free to ask." Heavenly Venerate Vast Expanse said, "Although it's just divine will, the memories left here before are still there." Divine will was ultimately divine will. It wouldn't update any memory information, and at the same time, it wouldn't communicate with the main body. I wonder if there's a saying about 10 refinements Earth Lord? Tianyun asked. 10 refinements Earth Lord? Heavenly Venerate Vast Expanse was startled, then immediately shook his head and said resolutely, "Completely never heard of it. At most, it's a 9 refinements Earth Lord cultivation. How can there be a 10 refinements Earth Lord?" Heavenly Venerate Vast Expanse said very firmly. Tianyun didn't ask anymore. He just wanted to ask these seniors if they had heard of it before. It seemed that their thoughts were already fixed and could not be changed. "Well then, I don't know Senior Vast Han, why did you let me come in? Is it because you want to talk about the recruitment of disciples?" Tianyun said as he brought the topic back to the main point. "Of course, that's not all. If you want to completely possess my treasures and become my in-name disciple, you'll have to pass the final test." The vast Empyrean squinted his eyes and looked into the distance. He smiled and said, "Looks like there are more guests coming." It's been a long time since 2 people came in at the same time. I've never seen 2 people come in at the same time. A figure appeared in front of him. It was the Divine Emperor Yuqin. It seemed that the Divine Emperor Yuqin had managed to comprehend it. His speed was only slightly slower than his. When the Divine Emperor Yuqin came in and saw Tianyun, he was shocked. "I thought you left, I didn't expect you to come in. You're a level faster than me again." Divine Monarch Yuqin's beautiful eyes were full of resentment. Tianyun was like a demon in her heart, constantly surpassing her, and she couldn't surpass him. She was about to go crazy. She was the reincarnation of an expert, but she was always suppressed. This made her want to vomit blood. She even suspected that the world had changed. How could there be so many geniuses? Luckily, there was only Yi Tianyun. Otherwise, she would really go crazy. Cough, cough. Just a little faster. When Yi Tianyun heard her resentful voice, he felt a little awkward. For some reason, she might have thought that he was in debt. Daddy. At this moment, a little boy rushed out from her bracelet and pounced into the arms of the vast Empyrean. Just like Tsuetsue, he was extremely attached to the vast Empyrean. Good boy, good boy. The vast Empyrean chuckled and patted the little boy's head. When the divine Emperor Yuqin saw the vast Empyrean, she greeted respectfully, Junior Yuqin greets Senior. She knew the big picture. Seeing that the senior was here, she didn't say much. What a girl. She is actually a reincarnated God Lord. The higher one's cultivation, the lower the chances of reincarnating with memories. You successfully reincarnated as a God Lord, but you barely survived. The vast Empyrean saw through the divine Emperor Yuqin's situation. The higher one's cultivation, the harder it was to reincarnate. This was going against the heavens. A God Lord was already strong enough, but to reincarnate with such terrifying power, wasn't that going against the heavens? Therefore, many people died here. Yet the divine Emperor Yuqin succeeded. One could only say that his luck was shocking. Just like what the vast Empyrean said, the chances of survival were slim, but he still succeeded. I did pay a price to be able to reincarnate. There were more external forces. The divine Emperor Yuqin said. No matter what it was, to be able to reincarnate successfully, your ability is really impressive. The vast Empyrean looked at the two of them and said, it is fate that the two of you came here together. Letting the two of you understand the power of a heavenly lord is actually a kind of foundation. Even if you can't become my nominal disciple, it will at least be of some help to you in the future. Yi Tianyun nodded. Even if they successfully made it here, they might not become his nominal disciple. The requirements of a heavenly lord were not limited to the way of the heavenly lord. To be able to walk the way of the heavenly lord, it means that your temperament isn't bad. However, the final test is still a test of temperament. The vast Empyrean said, I am a person who places a lot of emphasis on temperament, in other words, the Taoist heart. If the Taoist heart is not stable, talent is useless. Therefore, the way of the heavenly lord does not restrict cultivation. It is not that the higher the cultivation, the easier it is to walk. Only those with a stable Taoist heart can successfully reach it. Yi Tianyun and the divine Emperor Yuqin's Taoist hearts were very stable. They were not impetuous or exaggerated. Naturally, every step was very stable. They did not expect that the final test would still be a test of temperament. They thought that the way of the heavenly lord was long enough, but they still came here in the end. As long as the two of you pass the final test, you will be qualified to become my nominal disciple. When you break through to the heavenly lord, you will be able to contact me. At that time, I will bring you back to the sect. The vast Empyrean smiled faintly. Of course, this is an extremely long matter for the two of you. There are thousands of worlds, and I have set up so many thieving divine lands. So far, the number of people who can become my disciples is less than a handful. Senior Vast, are you saying that there is more than one thieving divine lands? Yi Tianyun quickly caught on to the words. That's right, there is more than one thieving divine lands. They are distributed in different areas. The vast Empyrean smiled and said, the thieving divine lands can be considered a good treasure that I have refined. It can absorb all the energy in the surroundings and fuse it together. However, if the body cannot resist the suction force, it will be swallowed. If you can resist the suction force, you can move freely here. Chapter 1125. From vast Empyrean's words, it could be seen that he had set up many places, but in the past 10 million years, the number of people who could become his disciples could be counted on one hand. It seemed like the difficulty was astonishing. How easy was it to become an Empyrean? If it was so easy to break through, the streets would have been filled with Empyreans. I created so many heaven-pilfering sacred lands in order to create an excellent trial environment. At the same time, it was to nurture these children. He reached out and rubbed Tsuetsue and the others' little heads, his eyes filled with kindness. However, there are very few cultivators who can resist this place. This is related to your abilities. It won't be easy to resist this suction force. When you can resist it one day, this place will become a holy land for you to cultivate. Vast Empyrean smiled. This cultivation environment is enough for you to cultivate to the peak of the Lord of Heaven level. Of course, I don't recommend staying here to cultivate, it's better to focus on actual combat. Without further ado, are the two of you ready to undergo the final test of the Tao heart? Vast Empyrean asked. He didn't explain too much, and it was more or less enough. Heaven-pilfering sacred lands were used to recruit disciples and nurture these treasures. With so many treasures placed here, if they weren't nurtured, these artifact spirits wouldn't be able to grow. Ready? They nodded. Since there was nothing to prepare now, they could just start. If you're ready, then we can begin now. Vast Empyrean stretched out a finger and lightly tapped their heads. At the same time, he said slowly, I don't know the content of your test, but this is a test of the Tao heart that touches the deepest part of your heart. If you pass, you can become my in-name disciple. If you fail, then it can only be said that there's no fate. Vast Empyrean's meaning was clear, there was only one chance. If they failed, then it could only be said that there was no fate and there wouldn't be a second chance to try. Senior Vast, what is success? Tianyun asked. Success is to wake up. If you fail, then let me help you wake up. Vast Empyrean explained, you only have 1 month. If you exceed 1 month, it will be considered a failure. Thus, you should wake up as soon as possible and not remain immersed in it. Understood. Soon after, they felt a ray of light pierce through their bodies. Then they felt as if they had fallen into a vortex. Everything felt so illusory. Swish, 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 a handsome youth was brandishing a spear in his hand. The snowflakes falling from the sky were constantly pierced by his spear. Following that, they turned into more snowflakes that fell down. His body was sturdy, and no matter if it was his talent or his vitality, they were all extremely rich and surging. He was definitely one of the best among his peers. Young master, you're cultivating again. At this time, Xiaoyan came in from outside. When she saw Tianyun's solid muscles, her pretty face blushed slightly and she was a little shy. That's right, I've just finished my training. Tianyun sheathed his spear and circulated his spirit energy to evaporate the sweat on his body, returning everything to its original state. There are people from other sects outside saying they want to duel with you. You want to challenge me? No problem, I'll go out now. Tianyun followed Xiaoyan out. There was already a sea of people outside. Many female disciples of Jade Palace looked at him with admiration and even more fanaticism. Tianyun, you're here. Sure, Shuyin came over. She was as cold as ever, but more than that, she was beautiful. Aunt, I'm here. Tianyun smiled and said, leave them to me. It's easy. Just like before, I'll beat these troublemakers. Aunt believes in you. Sure, Shuyin smiled slightly. Boy, this time we brought people to challenge you. If we lose this time, this Earth-level martial art belongs to you. If you lose, you have to hand over the Earth-level martial art and the martial art that you lost before. At this time, the elders of other sects stood up and looked at Tianyun angrily. Obviously, this is not the first time he lost. No problem, the premise is that you can really beat me. Tianyun clenched his long spear and flew to the arena. His cold eyes swept across the arena, making everyone tremble. Many people didn't dare to look him in the eye. Don't be arrogant, let me fight you. At this time, someone flew up from under the stage. His cultivation is not weaker than Tianyun. He clenched a giant axe. The sharp blade of the axe is enough to cut everything. As soon as he stepped on the stage, this person didn't wait for Lee Tianyun to reply. He already swept his axe towards him, trying to cut him in half. The overbearing momentum made the people under the stage couldn't help but step back a few steps, not daring to get too close to this arena. Lee Tianyun's eyes narrowed. He held the long spear in his hand and it turned into a cold light that pierced forward, and then heavily hit the giant axe. Dang! The tip of the spear collided with the blade of the axe. The whole spear was slightly bent, but the opponent's attack was bounced off by this spear. Such an overbearing attack was easily deflected by Lee Tianyun's spear. Then, he violently pulled again. The long spear was bent into a half moon, and it heavily smashed on the opponent's body. Pa! The opponent was directly sent flying by the spear, and he vomited blood in midair. When he fell, he was quickly caught by the opponent's elder. The huge impact still made the elder take a few steps back, and he almost lost his balance. Next, Lee Tianyun swung his long spear, and his momentum was like a rainbow. Young master won again, young master won again. Young master, young master, young master. Young master, young master, young master. The people below shouted with their blood boiling. They felt that Lee Tianyun is a king of victory. No matter who it is, they can be easily defeated. Lee Tianyun suddenly felt a great sense of achievement. This is the feeling he wanted, to be respected by thousands of people, and everything went so smoothly. No one can compare with him, and nothing can disobey his will. The battle quickly came to an end, and Lee Tianyun easily challenged the entire sect and won this amazing battle. Everything went so smoothly, there were no ups and downs, no danger, it was so peaceful. Immediately after, Jade Palace began to rapidly expand its power, quickly rising to the third-grade faction, and then to the fourth-grade empire, dominating a region. Lee Tianyun became a great emperor at a young age, with countless beauties, and countless subordinates. Everyone obeyed his call, and no one dared not obey. Everything went so smoothly that he was deeply immersed in it, unable to extricate himself. Chapter 1126. Lee Tianyun always felt that he was missing something, but he couldn't remember it. He felt like he had forgotten something, and his mind was blank. Heavenly Cloud's great emperor, what are you thinking about? A beautiful woman next to him came over, and there were several other beauties on the side, sprinkling petals on him. Countless petals fell into the water, making the pool smell so fragrant. Countless beauties, a powerful force, everything went smoothly. No matter which force he attacked, the other side quickly surrendered. There were countless opportunities along the way, and he found a lot of treasures and martial arts, which greatly improved his cultivation. But it was so smooth that it made him wonder, is this still me? I seem to have forgotten something. Lee Tianyun frowned. Don't think about it too much, just leave these things to your subordinates. Great Emperor, you have worked hard for so long, it's time to enjoy it. Yes, your subordinates are all powerful people, so you don't need to worry about anything. No matter what, they can easily help you solve it. Yes, and the Snow Cloud Empress is about to give birth, you should accompany her more. One by one, the beauties who served him persuaded him not to think too much, and all kinds of delicious food were constantly stuffed into his mouth, enjoying all kinds of treatment. Lee Tianyun frowned, and he felt that something was wrong. He pushed them away and said in a deep voice, "No, I am not like this at all. I have experienced so many life and death situations along the way, I have experienced so many ups and downs, how can it be so smooth? These are my precious experiences, they are all the process of strengthening my Tao heart, how can it be gone just like that? This is not my world, and I don't want to stay here." Lee Tianyun's power broke out, and the pool around him scattered, and he directly rushed out of the palace and flew outside. Outside was a luxurious palace, and the commoners were living very comfortably. Everything was ruled perfectly. But because it was so perfect, there was a big problem. Everything was perfect, and it meant that there were problems everywhere. It was undeniable that this place was so perfect, it was the world he had always imagined. There was no dispute, no struggle, and from the beginning, there was no tragedy. But all of this was an illusion, and what he experienced must not be erased. All of these were his precious experiences. Without these experiences, how could he have such a firm Tao heart? There were many things that the system could not provide. After experiencing so many life and death situations, after experiencing so many dangers, it was all proof that he existed, proof that he was still alive. Heavenly Cloud's great emperor, what happened to you? A group of people flew over from all directions, and when they saw Yi Tianyun rush out, they were all shocked, not knowing what was going on. This also included Shi Shuiyun. She flew over with her big belly and stared at him blankly. Tianyun, what's wrong? Shi Shuiyun flew over and asked. It's okay. Yi Tianyun reached out and stroked the hair between her eyebrows. He smiled and said, you're still beautiful no matter what. Shi Shuiyun blushed and said embarrassedly, scoundrel, there are so many people watching, what are you talking about? Everything was so real, no different from reality. He gently stroked Shi Shuiyun's belly and said with a smile, it's a pity that I can't see the birth of my child again. He glanced around and said with a smile, thank you for your company, goodbye. Shi Shuiyun grabbed him and said hurriedly, Tianyun, where are you going? Leave this place, leave this illusory world. Although you are illusory, I still want to thank you for letting me have such a sweet dream. I haven't had such a sweet dream for a long time, thank you so much. Yi Tianyun gently shook off Shi Shuiyun's hand, stepped on the void, and turned into a meteor that pierced through the world, leaving a group of stunned cultivators behind. In the end, the meteor hit the sky fiercely, and the whole world turned into countless fragments. Such a beautiful world was completely gone, turned into countless fragments. Then, these fragments completely turned into powder, and disappeared from this world forever. At the same time, he suddenly opened his eyes, revealing a firm look. At this moment, Tsuetsue's adorable little face appeared in front of him, staring at him directly. That's great, I knew that master would definitely wake up. Father, Tsuetsue guessed correctly. Tsuetsue jumped into Yi Tianyun's arms and said happily, I didn't guess wrong, I didn't guess wrong. Yi Tianyun looked at Tsuetsue in his arms, then looked at the vast heavenly venerate in front of him, and smiled, Senior Vast, I passed, right? Everything felt like a trance, but in reality, it was only for a short while. He only stayed in this sweet dream for a few days. But he stayed in this sweet dream for a few decades, or even 100 years, it was such a long time. Past, if this is not a pass, no one can pass. The vast heavenly venerate said with a smile, I didn't expect you to wake up after spending only 3 days. Such a perfect world, but you gave up so easily, it really surprised me. Your Taoist heart is so firm that no one can match it. Yi Tianyun smiled and turned to look at the divine Emperor Yuqin beside him. She, on the other hand, had been in a dream, and no one knew what kind of sweet dream she was having. She kept smiling, feeling that it was very wonderful, and she didn't want to wake up. She sank deeper, very deep, and there is no sign of her waking up at all. The vast heavenly venerate said, reincarnation and recultivation may seem like an additional lifetime of memories, but in reality, it is easier for one's Taoist heart to sink completely. After all, the pain she has experienced is undoubtedly more, and she yearns for that kind of beautiful world. It was not that the more experience, the better it was, especially that kind of terrifying experience. The more one experienced, the more pain they felt, and they didn't want to wake up from the sweet dream. I think she will wake up. Yi Tianyun shook his head and said. Oh, so sure. The vast heavenly venerate laughed. She will definitely wake up. Yi Tianyun answered simply. Is that so? Then let's wait and see. Many people are stuck at this stage. 1 foot in hell, 1 foot in heaven, it all depends on a single thought. The vast heavenly venerate sighed and continued to taste his tea. Yi Tianyun got up and sat beside him, drinking tea with him, waiting for the Divine Emperor Yuqin to wake up. The reason why he believed that the Divine Emperor Yuqin would wake up was mainly because these days, he saw that the Divine Emperor Yuqin was cold on the inside, but in reality, she was a very kind person. It was just that as time passed, she started to become cold, and that was to protect him. Chapter 11:27. After Tianyun got out of the illusion, he drank tea with the vast sky sovereign and didn't do anything else. At most, he drank tea while absorbing the rich astral power around him to increase his experience. He had to admit that it was quite a big increase. The vast sky sovereign didn't say much. He seemed to be waiting for the results of the Divine Emperor Yuqin. If the Divine Emperor Yuqin passed, the two of them could announce it together. That would save a lot of trouble. Plus, it was only a month. There was no hurry. Anyway, the jade pendant wouldn't be consumed here. It was much safer than outside. This was a special space. There wouldn't be any problems. Days passed. The Divine Emperor Yuqin was still immersed in a beautiful dream. He didn't want to wake up. She must have failed. There are only a few days left. Cui Cui didn't stay with the vast sky sovereign anymore. Instead, she liked to stick to Tianyun. Tianyun had an aura that made her feel comfortable. It was just that he didn't take off the longevity suit. Nonsense. My master will definitely pass. She is very powerful. She passed my test easily. The little boy retorted. He was the weapon spirit of the Divine Emperor Yuqin's treasure. Since he followed the Divine Emperor Yuqin, he would naturally side with his master. Humph. My master is the best. He passed in 3 days. Cui Cui swung her little feet. Tianyun rubbed her little head and said, "You really are a bit like my daughter, you should play with my daughter, I think it would be more interesting." Master's daughter is interesting. Cui Cui's eyes lit up. She was looking forward to it. Tianyun smiled. He wanted to go back. Of course. I will take you to see her. In the blink of an eye, his daughter must have grown up a lot. 1 year here was equivalent to many years on the other side. By the time he returned, she would have grown into a beautiful young lady. While they were chatting, the Divine Emperor Yuqin slowly opened her eyes. Her beautiful eyes were still filled with nostalgia, as if she still didn't want to wake up. Everything is just a passing cloud. The Divine Emperor Yuqin shook his head and sighed deeply. No one knew what she was dreaming about, but it seemed that she had already noticed it. She just didn't plan to come out until the time was right. Master! The little boy pounced on Cui Cui excitedly. He then turned his head and made a face at Cui Cui. See? My master is awake. Humph. Cui Cui turned her head and ignored him. Congratulations on passing this test. It seems like your Tao hearts are indeed very strong. Empyrean Vast Expanse laughed. Your Tao hearts are indeed not bad. You can wake up at any time, but you don't want to. Some beautiful things were just dreams. If I want to turn this dream into reality, I just need to become stronger. Empyrean Vast Expanse is right. The nostalgia in the Divine Emperor Yuqin's eyes disappeared in the blink of an eye and was replaced by determination. Tianyun smiled. It was indeed as Empyrean Vast Expanse said. Everything was based on strength. As long as they were strong enough, all their dreams could be realized. Everything was a matter of strength. As long as they were strong enough, what dream couldn't be realized? Both of you have passed my test. This proves that you have strong Tao hearts. You are in line with my expectations. Empyrean Vast Expanse looked at them and said, "Do you know why I have been testing your Tao hearts? Talent isn't the key. Diligence isn't the key either. The real key is to have a strong Tao heart. Only then can you ensure that you won't be invaded by demons and strengthen your cultivation heart." Tianyun answered. A strong Tao heart was more important than any talent. Many people couldn't do this. Without a strong Tao heart, many things couldn't be done well. That's right. The Tao heart is especially important in the later stages. Some who reach the later stages of cultivation feel like they are lost in it and can't break through the bottleneck. Or they get addicted to power, causing them to stagnate. The Tao heart is the most important existence. Empyrean Vast Expanse was very satisfied with Yi Tianyun's answer. So many true powerhouses all have a strong Tao heart. Therefore, if you want to become a true powerhouse, you must first have a strong Tao heart. Therefore, when I choose disciples, I naturally need a strong Tao heart. Without a strong Tao heart, there's no way to become my disciple. Now that both of you have a strong Tao heart, it's enough to become my in-name disciples. Empyrean Vast Expanse revealed a smile again. These two treasures are yours now. I hope that you treat them well and nurture them. They will definitely be of great help to you in the future. If we don't pass the final test, can we not bring them away? Yi Tianyun looked at Suetsue and the others. Of course not. Even if you pass their test, we won't let you take them away. Empyrean Vast Expanse said. Yi Tianyun was a little depressed. If they didn't pass the test, they wouldn't be able to take them away. I know it's a little harsh. First, you have to get their recognition before you can walk to the final step. Empyrean Vast Expanse smiled. All right, we understand. They all knew what he meant. These were Empyrean Vast Expanse's treasures. He definitely couldn't give them to them casually. If they didn't even recognize their own treasures, they wouldn't be able to walk to the final test. As for stripping them of their treasures, it was actually very simple. Although they had already recognized them as their master, Empyrean Vast Expanse was a heavenly venerate. Furthermore, he was their previous master. Taking back their ownership was no problem at all. Of course, other than letting them follow you, I have other things to give you. Empyrean Vast Expanse smiled. Since you are my in-name disciples, I won't mistreat you. Following that, he waved his hand. 5 balls of light floated in the void, spinning in the air. Yi Tianyun looked up and saw that each of the 5 balls of light was a martial art manual. Looking over, they were all superior-grade heavenly Tao martial arts. It was definitely a huge sum. Empyrean Vast Expanse was indeed worthy of being a heavenly venerate. Here are 5 superior-grade heavenly Tao martial arts, enough for you to cultivate to the heavenly venerate level. However, even if they are superior-grade heavenly Tao martial arts, they might not be able to help you cultivate to the heavenly venerate level. Everything will depend on your own luck. Having a heaven-defying martial art did not mean that there would be no bottlenecks. There would still be bottlenecks. However, with such a powerful martial art, it would have a certain supporting effect. The success rate would definitely be much higher than others. Superior-grade heavenly Tao martial arts. Yi Tianyun's eyes lit up. To him, this was really a treasure. Chapter 1128. High-grade heavenly Tao martial arts. Putting aside Yi Tianyun, even the divine Emperor Yuqin's eyes lit up. She did have a heavenly Tao martial art, but it was only a low-grade heavenly Tao martial art. Middle-grade heavenly Tao martial arts were already her dream martial arts. It was already too difficult to obtain a mid-grade heavenly Tao martial art, let alone a high-grade heavenly Tao martial art. Back then, she was a divine monarch, but that didn't mean that all divine monarchs were wealthy enough to possess many heavenly Tao martial arts. She was only able to obtain a low-grade heavenly Tao martial art, and that was after paying a hefty price. Now that there were 5 heavenly Tao martial arts in front of her, she was overjoyed. This was something that she could only dream of. This was a heavenly Tao martial art. With a high-grade heavenly Tao martial art, she would definitely be able to advance by leaps and bounds. There are 5 high-grade heavenly Tao martial arts here, and they are all martial arts that I have created. Every martial art is different, and you can choose according to your needs. Of course, the main factor is your control over your heavenly venerate prowess. As long as you are capable enough, you can take as many as you can. If you can't even get a single one, I will still choose one for you. After all, you are still an in-name disciple. Although your control isn't outstanding, it will improve in the future. The vast heavenly venerate's shocking reply left the divine emperor Yuqin dumbfounded. Senior Vast. No, master, you are saying that if I can get it, I can have it all. The divine emperor Yuqin was dumbfounded. It was as though a pie had fallen from the sky. If he could get his hands on all 5 high-grade heavenly Tao martial arts, wouldn't he be invincible? That's right. As long as you are capable enough, feel free to take it. The vast heavenly venerate smiled. Yi Tianyun looked at the 5 martial arts floating in the air and smiled, but he didn't say anything. I will give it a try now. The divine emperor Yuqin couldn't wait to give it a try. It was already a pleasant surprise to be able to get one. Of course, the vast heavenly venerate had said that even if they couldn't get a single one, he would still choose one for them. This meant that there was an absolutely guaranteed opportunity, and they could even choose for themselves. It was truly generous. Immediately, the divine emperor Yuqin gathered his strength and quickly flew up. He extended his hand and inserted it into the ball of light, wanting to take out the martial art. Who would have thought that as soon as she touched the ball of light, she would be bounced off, flying dozens of meters before landing. This kind of counterforce was considered weak. It only bounced off slightly. However, he failed on his first try and didn't get the martial art easily. Although there was no limit to the number of times, it didn't look good. I have to control my strength well and synchronize it with this energy in order to pass through. This is a more gentle method. If you are strong enough to blow it up, you can also remove it, Heavenly Premier Vast Expanse explained. The divine emperor Yuqin nodded. She knew that she couldn't succeed on the first try. She had to try a few more times. Following that, she flew over again, not choosing to break through the barrier with brute force. If one were to use brute force to break through, it would simply be a joke in the face of the vast power of a heavenly venerate. Thus, he could only choose the first method. Breaking through with brute force was not advisable at all. It would only make him lose face. Pang! The divine emperor Yuqin was bounced off once again. However, she didn't land. She spun her delicate body and flew over at high speed. Very quickly, she tried again. Pang! She was bounced off again. However, it was obvious that her small hand had already pierced in a little. This proved that there was still a chance and not no chance at all. After trying again and again, the divine emperor Yuqin didn't know how many times she had failed. Her delicate hand pierced deeper and deeper into the barrier. It could be seen with the naked eye that she was just a little bit away from touching the martial art. The divine emperor Yuqin didn't seem to know fatigue. She kept trying, piercing into the barrier again and again. Finally, her entire palm was inserted into the ball of light. She used her strength to grab the martial art and forcefully pulled it out. I finally got it. Although she had gotten the martial art, the divine emperor Yuqin looked battered and exhausted. Even her delicate hand had suffered some injuries. She looked quite pitiful. However, these were all superficial wounds. It would be fine after a little recovery. Compared to this, the martial art was more important. She had to obtain the martial art that she wanted. There were some people who wouldn't be able to obtain a Heaven's Path martial art even if they had to pay with their lives. These were just superficial wounds, so naturally, it wouldn't be a problem. She rested for a moment before continuing on. After all, this was a rare opportunity, so she had to try harder. If you wish to obtain the second martial art, the difficulty will increase. Grasp this opportunity well, the vast heavenly paragon reminded her. As expected, when the divine emperor Yuqin tried to obtain the second martial art, she realized that the difficulty was several times higher than before. If it was a piece of paper that she could barely pierce through previously, it would be equivalent to a metal plate now. The increase in difficulty was so great that she felt like puking blood. She thought that after obtaining the first martial art, she would be able to familiarize herself with the control of energy and obtain the other martial arts. Who knew that the second martial art would be even more frightening? If she couldn't pierce through it, she would only be able to obtain one martial art. This was no different from asking the vast heavenly paragon to give them the martial art directly. However, the divine Emperor Yuqin didn't give up. She kept on trying, determined to obtain two martial arts no matter what. Yi Tianyun sat by the side, sipping on his tea as he watched her try again and again. In any case, he had plenty of time, so he wasn't in a hurry. Thus, he allowed the divine Emperor Yuqin to try as she pleased. Very soon, after a long period of trying, the divine Emperor Yuqin finally obtained the second martial art. This could be considered as a huge breakthrough. In terms of control, there was a huge improvement. Master, you really don't forget to continue testing us. Yi Tianyun shook his head. How could he not know what the vast heavenly paragon was thinking? This was a kind of test. However, a test with rewards was more motivating. From now on, you will be cultivating on your own. Naturally, I'll teach you as much as I can. In the future, you won't be able to see each other unless you break through to the heavenly paragon realm, the vast heavenly paragon said with a smile. Yi Tianyun nodded. The vast heavenly paragon was just a spiritual will, so he wasn't able to teach them too much. From now on, they would only be able to see the vast heavenly paragon when they had a breakthrough in their cultivation. I give up. The divine Emperor Yuqin finally gave up on the third martial art. She wasn't someone who gave up easily, but she knew that she wouldn't be able to succeed in a short period of time. This third one was too difficult. I feel that I have to break through in my cultivation again, and improve in other aspects. Why? Don't you want to try more? Yi Tianyun chuckled. The divine Emperor Yuqin rolled her eyes at him. Do you think it's that easy? If you're strong, go and try it yourself. Let's see how many martial arts manuals you can get. She knew her limits. Although there was a mountain of treasures in front of her, she knew that she wasn't strong enough. In the end, she still chose to give up. Chapter 1129. Although the divine Emperor Yuqin took away two martial arts manuals, the vast heavenly lord quickly replenished them. These martial arts manuals were created by him, so he could replenish as much as he wanted. All he needed to do was use his divine sense to replenish one of them. Yi Tianyun came under the 5 balls of light and looked up at them. He released the appraisal eye to examine their energy situation. The appraisal eye was almost omnipotent. As long as it was a material object, it could analyze it in detail. I would like to see how many manuals you can get this time. The divine Emperor Yuqin sat down, took the teacup and gulped down a mouthful of tea. The heavenly lord's power is not that easy to break. Do you think it is cabbages that can be picked up from the streets? Master will definitely get a lot of manuals. Cui Cui retorted. Seems like you like him. The divine Emperor Yuqin looked at her up and down. An artifact spirit. You have just followed him, but you are already so attached to him. How rare. I like Master, so what? Cui Cui said angrily. There is no problem with you liking him. Then how many manuals do you think he can get? The divine Emperor Yuqin asked. At least 3 manuals. Cui Cui stretched out 3 fingers. No matter what, it was one more than the divine Emperor Yuqin. 3 manuals. The divine Emperor Yuqin thought for a while and smiled. Seems like you don't know how difficult the 3rd manual is. Previously, I only came down slightly later than him, which means that the gap is not that big. In a situation where the gap is not that big, he can still get 3 manuals. The divine Emperor Yuqin's deduction was not wrong. She only came down slightly later than Yi Tianyun. The gap was not that big. In this situation, it meant that their standards were about the same. If I say 3 manuals, then 3 manuals. Master will definitely get 3 manuals. Cui Cui said angrily. Quite stubborn. The divine Emperor Yuqin shook his head. If you lose, will you choose to follow me? I don't reject any treasures. I'm not following. You bastard. Tsuetsue didn't dare to look at the divine Emperor Yuqin in the eyes. She ran to Yi Tianyun's side and stared at her fiercely. The divine Emperor Yuqin. No, it should be Earth Lord Yuqin. Are you trying to kidnap my artifact spirit? Yi Tianyun hugged Tsuetsue and smiled at her. He knew that the divine Emperor Yuqin was just joking. He just wanted to bully Tsuetsue. Of course I miss her. She has so much confidence in you. Don't you want to gamble? The divine Emperor Yuqin laughed. What about you? Don't you want to try and gamble with that artifact spirit? Yi Tianyun glanced at the little boy and laughed. I won't bet on artifact spirits. If you really surpass me, I'll tell you my secret. How about it? The divine Emperor Yuqin laughed. Correspondingly, if you lose, I won't ask for much. Just let me rub her. How about that? As she spoke, she even moved her fingers. She wanted to rub Tsuetsue hard. She wanted to let her know the consequences of talking nonsense. No problem. Yi Tianyun rubbed Tsuetsue's little head. However, I won't let you get your way. Dig out your memories and explain everything to me. You make it sound like you'll definitely get the third book. The divine Emperor Yuqin rolled her eyes. She still thought that Yi Tianyun wouldn't be able to get the third book. She had already tried it. How could she not know? The vast heavenly venerate was also looking over. He wanted to see how Yi Tianyun would perform. After waiting for a while, Yi Tianyun was ready to retrieve the martial arts. Master, you can do it. Tsuetsue didn't want to be trampled on by the divine Emperor Yuqin. She definitely wanted Yi Tianyun to win this round. Yi Tianyun smiled at her. Then, he leaped up and reached his hand into the ball of light. The divine Emperor Yuqin's eyes brightened. She wanted to see Yi Tianyun get flung away. However, she saw Yi Tianyun reach out and easily take one of the martial arts. What? You succeeded on the first try. The divine Emperor Yuqin was dumbfounded. She thought that he would have to try many times. Who knew that he would succeed so quickly? The vast heavenly venerate squinted his eyes. He was also shocked by Yi Tianyun's precise control. I got the first book. After Yi Tianyun kept the martial arts, he leaped up again and reached out his hand. He easily passed through the second ball of light and took the martial arts. I got the second book. There wasn't any obstruction. He got it easily. It felt as easy as drinking water. Previously, the divine Emperor Yuqin had tried countless times before he finally succeeded. Yi Tianyun succeeded so easily. This made her so depressed that she wanted to vomit blood. How could he succeed so easily? She felt that what Yi Tianyun had reached wasn't the thick shield. Instead, it was a thin layer of paper. One poke and it would break. The vast heavenly venerate's eyes narrowed. This had far exceeded his expectations. He could easily surpass the time that the divine Emperor Yuqin needed. Although there wasn't a time limit, it was still shocking to get it so easily. The second book. The second book. Tsuetsue jumped up excitedly and clapped her hands. The divine Emperor Yuqin and the others were stunned and didn't know what to say. Yi Tianyun's eyes narrowed and locked onto one of the martial arts. He leaped up again and stuck his hand in. Once again, he easily reached inside and pulled the third book out. There was no difficulty at all. Just like moving clouds and flowing water, everything went smoothly. I got the third book. Yi Tianyun grabbed the martial arts in his hand and smiled at the divine Emperor Yuqin. You lost. This is unbelievable. How did you get it so easily? The divine Emperor Yuqin's eyes widened. She couldn't believe what she had just seen. She always thought that Yi Tianyun wasn't too far away from her. Now, it seemed like she had thought too much. Not only was the difference not big, it was like the difference between heaven and earth. She spent a long time to get the second martial arts book. She couldn't even get the third one. In the end, she chose to give up. Yi Tianyun used only a little bit of effort and easily got it. It could be said that he was an existence that defeated her in every aspect. They weren't on the same level at all. Isn't it the same as you? I have to put my hand in and control the energy to get in. What's the difference? Yi Tianyun shrugged. The reason why he could get it so easily was naturally because of his scouting eyes. At first, when he watched the Divine Emperor Yuqin try again and again, he had already observed the situation of the light and recorded the energy. When he personally came here, he could easily succeed according to these standards. As for the fourth book, he had to try a few more times. After all, directly observing from below was far less than the Divine Emperor Yuqin's constant testing. Chapter 1130. 3 high-grade heavenly Tao martial arts were easily obtained. If they were placed in the outside world, it would definitely attract a frenzied slaughter. This was a martial art that could allow one to become a heavenly venerable. How could they not be envious? If the elders of grade 2 god realms were to find out about this, they would probably go crazy. They basically did not have any high-grade heavenly Tao martial arts. Even if they did, they would only have 1 or 2. But that was not the main point. The main point was that these martial arts came from the hands of the vast heavenly venerable. What could be better than this? Now that Yi Tianyun had 3 heavenly Tao martial arts, it would definitely cause a frenzy. 3 books, 3 books. Master, you're really amazing. Tsuetsue was extremely excited. Now, she no longer needed to worry about being trampled on. She could go and trample on the Divine Emperor Yuqin. No hurry, I can continue. Yi Tianyun's eyes narrowed. He flew up and reached his hand into the ball of light. But just as he reached in, he was bounced back. Seeing this scene, the Divine Emperor Yuqin heaved a sigh of relief. It would really be strange if he could take it down so easily. Seeing that he was bounced back, it proved that the ball of light's protective barrier was still effective. He needed to have better control to take it down. Not bad, not bad, this is only the first attempt, but I can already reach a small part. The vast heavenly venerable's eyes lit up. Even if he failed, he was already halfway there. Yi Tianyun did not stop. He flew over again and stabbed out with his hand. This time, it was a bit longer than before. But he was still bounced back. It was obvious that he could not take it down easily the second time, but he would not give up. He continued to try. He was bounced back again and again, but he improved every time. After 7 to 8 attempts, he finally reached in and took out the martial art. Success, the fourth one. Yi Tianyun fell from the air and smiled as he put away the fourth martial art book. This situation caused the Divine Emperor Yuqin to have a complicated look in his eyes. He had only tried for a short while, and he had already easily solved the fourth book. He was much faster than her. Yi Tianyun did not stop. He quickly continued to try the last martial art. Since he was going to take it, he would definitely take all the martial arts. Otherwise, he would not give up. Again. He continued to grab, but his first attempt ended in failure. The fifth martial art was even more difficult to pick up. It was not that the fifth book was too precious, but as the number of martial arts decreased, the difficulty increased. Yi Tianyun tried again and again. Every time he failed, he would notice the energy waves of the light. At the same time, he was able to use the same amount of energy to probe in, but there would be some differences every time, so he had to continue trying. This ball of light was actually very simple. All he had to do was emit the same energy fluctuations as this ball of light, and he would be able to enter. To put it bluntly, he wanted the ball of light to think that he was one of them and then let him in. The principle was very simple, but it required a lot of control to match his own energy waves with the ball of lights. The Divine Emperor Yuqin was temporarily unable to do it, but Yi Tianyun was able to do it. He just needed to try a few more times, and he would be able to succeed. Pang! Tianyun was sent flying, but before he landed on the ground, he had already bounced up in the air. After which, he stabbed his hand into the ball of light and finally penetrated it, grabbing the Heaven Dao martial art within. Come out! Tianyun quickly pulled it out and slowly landed on the ground. Everything was so calm and relaxed. Compared to the pathetic state the Divine Emperor Yuqin was in previously, this was much more relaxed. 5 books, I got 5 books. Tsuetsue pounced over and hugged Tianyun. She said excitedly, Master, you are really amazing. You actually got 5 books, 3 more than her. She was already filled with admiration for Tianyun, and the vast heavenly venerate couldn't even be bothered with him. You've already shouted many times today. Tianyun rubbed her little head and walked over with a smile. Master, I'm sorry, but I've already gotten all the martial arts. It's alright. It's just that these 5 martial arts are all different. Cultivate them according to your own situation. The vast heavenly venerate smiled, and then his tone turned serious. However, there is one thing you have to take note of, and that is that you absolutely cannot spread it. If you do, you will definitely be punished by the heavenly Tao. Cultivating my martial arts is equivalent to making a vow that you absolutely cannot spread it. If you spread it, you will be punished by the heavenly Tao. There are no exceptions. If it could be spread at will, there would be no need for the heavenly venerate path to exist. They could just spread the martial arts around. Whoever learned it and broke through to the heavenly venerate level would be chosen as a disciple. How simple was that? The vast heavenly venerate wouldn't do that. If it was ruined by others, it was something he didn't want to see. Master, disciple will definitely not spread it. Tianyun and the Divine Emperor Yuqin nodded, their expressions solemn. This wasn't a joking matter. Very well, this is our farewell gift to you. Of course, there is also this heaven-pilfering divine ground. As long as you cultivate well, you won't need those barriers and can easily come in to cultivate. The vast heavenly venerate said. The devouring ability of the heaven-pilfering divine ground couldn't be changed at will. It could only be offset by resisting the devouring. Otherwise, it could only be offset by these treasures. After explaining everything, when they were about to leave, Tianyun suddenly thought of something and asked, Master, do we need to leave our names outside? Leaving their names was naturally the cliff outside. There were a total of 8 names. Oh, that's up to you. It doesn't matter if you leave or not. Those who can climb up here are all geniuses. After they grasp a bit of control, they will leave their names outside to promote themselves. The vast heavenly venerate said with a smile, I didn't ask them to leave their names outside. There's no need for that. It's all a matter of their interest. Tianyun was speechless. So that was what was going on. He thought that they had to leave their names outside, but it turned out that they loved face and felt that doing so would give them face. They would definitely leave their names outside. Alright then, I won't leave my name outside. Tianyun looked at the Divine Emperor Yuqin and said, What about you? Do you plan to leave your name outside? Not interested. The Divine Emperor Yuqin's eyes were filled with absent-mindedness. It seemed that he was still immersed in Tianyun's violent martial arts. Then I look forward to you breaking through to the heavenly venerate level. The path of cultivation isn't easy. I hope that your Tao heart will become stronger and stronger. The vast heavenly venerate smiled and waved his hand. 2 rays of light enveloped them and they disappeared. Chapter 1131. When Tianyun and the Divine Emperor Yuqin reappeared at the peak, everyone turned to look at them. After all, they were too conspicuous. How could they not be conspicuous when standing at the highest peak? Are they the powerhouses who have reached the peak of the Heavenly Lord path? Many of them were newcomers, so they had never seen Tianyun and the Divine Emperor Yuqin before. Therefore, they looked at them curiously. Most of them were looking forward to seeing if the two of them would carve their names on the cliff. That way, they would be able to find out what their names were. Who knew that Yi Tianyun and the Divine Emperor Yuqin would fly away and not stay for long? This place was too conspicuous. They didn't like to be high profile, so they chose to leave as soon as they came out. Before Yi Tianyun left, he looked over and saw that the purple-crowned Lord of Heaven and the others had already left. They had stayed at the vast Heavenly Lord's side for a long time. The purple-crowned Lord of Heaven and the others didn't have their jade pendants anymore, so they naturally had to leave. What's going on? They left without carving their names. They were all shocked. They thought that they would leave their names on the cliff. Who would have thought that they wouldn't do that? Instead, they just left. This made them very disappointed. They didn't know what their names were. At least, they would know what they were called when they went out. However, they could only find out by asking around. After Yi Tianyun and the Divine Emperor Yuqin flew away, Yi Tianyun asked, "You lost just now. You are willing to accept your loss. Can you tell me your secret now?" The Divine Emperor Yuqin was silent for a while. Then, he looked ahead and said, "Let's go down from there. Since you are a little interested, I will tell you." Soon after, the two of them flew down from the sky and landed in the forest at the side, which could be considered a relatively hidden place. When they found a good place to stay, the Divine Emperor Yuqin looked like he wanted to say something. Yi Tianyun shrugged his shoulders and said, "If you really don't want to say it, then don't." He was only interested to see why a Divine Lord would be willing to work for a Grade 2 God realm. Especially when the things he did were not very honorable. Of course, he also wanted to know why they were doing this. There were too many suspicious points, but if these things were not mentioned, he would be too lazy to know. "No, I just want to say that the more you know, the more dangerous it is." The Divine Emperor Yuqin shook his head and sighed, "There's nothing wrong with wanting to know. It's just that with your current qualifications, knowing too much would be dangerous. Even though you've received Master Hao Han's inheritance and obtained so many Heaven Dao martial arts, it's still not worth mentioning in the face of great power. I know this very well. An individual is very insignificant, and when faced with such terrifying power, they can be easily killed. How could Yi Tianyun not know that a divine monarch could easily kill me?" Yi Tianyun said with a smile. How could Yi Tianyun not know that a divine monarch could easily suppress him? With such a huge difference in cultivation, there was no way he could withstand it. Even so, I still want to know more about the situation. Otherwise, I won't even know what's going on if I'm implicated. Taking precautions had always been Yi Tianyun's principle of being cautious. Indeed, it's better to know some things than not to know. The Divine Emperor Yuqin looked at him and said, "I hope you won't reveal what's going to happen next." Actually, the Grade 3 God Realm is currently plotting something, and that is the God Realm War. God Realm War. Yi Tianyun's eyes narrowed. He could already smell the scent of war. Yes, this God Realm War is not some God Realm Ascension battle. Compared to the God Realm War, the God Realm Ascension battle is just child's play. The God Realm War is a battle between many Grade 3 God Realms, and more than a dozen forces will be implicated in it. This means that once the war breaks out, lives will be lost. Even Grade 2 God Realms will be implicated, while Grade 1 God Realms will be in a better situation. As for the God Realm War, you can imagine how fierce it will be. Many experts will gather together and fight in a frenzy, resulting in countless deaths and injuries. The sky will be filled with experts from the Lord of Heaven, and many divine monarchs, and even heavenly venerables will participate in the war. At that time, earthly monarchs will be so insignificant, and even the Lord of Heaven will be so powerless. It can be said that anyone below the divine monarch level will be cannon fodder. After listening, Yi Tianyun can't help but be moved. Why would there be a God Realm War out of nowhere? Yi Tianyun frowned and said, "Could it be because of some treasure?" "That's right, they are fighting for the right to enter a Grade 4 God Realm. It can be said to be a treasure that will allow them to advance." The Divine Emperor Yuqin raised a finger and said, among so many grade 3 god realms, only one will be able to obtain the right to advance. The rest are all losers. Yi Tianyun's eyes narrowed, and he said in a low voice, this is a little too ruthless. There are so many god realms, and only one will have the right to choose. So many people are still willing to join the war. Of course, these dozen or so god realm forces can no longer take another step forward. They can only improve by entering a grade 4 god realm. Otherwise, it will be meaningless. The Divine Emperor Yuqin shook his head and said, there are many who participate, but there are even more who don't. So this time, the force you are in is plundering geniuses wantonly just for this war. Yi Tianyun had a rough idea of what was going on. That's right, it's still early. There are still thousands of years or even tens of thousands of years before the God Realm War starts. Everything depends on the time when the heavenly treasure descends, it will be an absolute slaughter. The Divine Emperor Yuqin explained. Yi Tianyun thought for a moment, then looked at her and said, what about you? Have you always been a member of that force? Why does it seem to me that you are not very willing to work for the force you are in? This could be deduced from the fact that the Divine Emperor Yuqin let her go. I was able to reincarnate successfully because of their help. Logically speaking, they are my benefactors. I should repay them. The Divine Emperor Yuqin shook his head and said, later on, I realized that this is what I deserve. However, I have already made a vow to serve them for 10,000 years. There is no way to change it. Her eyes are full of anger and grief. Although Yi Tianyun doesn't know the details, but he can roughly judge that she was played like a fiddle. This was like the 10,000 star stones that originally belonged to her, but one day, they were stolen from her house. Then, the thief came and said that he would give them to her as a gift to solve her urgent need. She was so grateful that she shed tears and said that she would repay the other party. This was a typical case of being sold, yet she still helped the other party earn money. She had been completely cheated. Chapter 1132. This is indeed a sorrowful matter, Yi Tianyun coughed lightly. He felt that the Divine Emperor Yuqin was truly a tragedy. He was completely fooled by others. He had sworn an oath, and there was no way he could change his mind. He could only choose to obey. The oath could only be broken 10,000 years later. At that time, everyone would have finished participating in the Divine Domain War, and the other party would have achieved their goal. As for whether or not they would seek revenge, it would be up to them once the Divine Domain War was over. If they successfully obtained the qualifications to enter a grade 4 god realm, then the Divine Emperor Yuqin would be nothing. Of course, there was also the possibility that the Divine Emperor Yuqin would die in the Divine Domain War, and everything would end prematurely. There's no such thing as sorrow. This is my own choice. The Divine Emperor Yuqin looked at him and said, the best thing for you to do now is to hide or keep a low profile. At the very least, don't tell anyone about the martial arts Master Haohan imparted to us. Otherwise, you will definitely be killed. High-grade Heaven's Path martial arts were something that even a grade 3 God Realm expert would covet, much less a grade 2 God Realm expert. Of course, since they had sworn an oath, there was no way they could divulge it. If they did, only death awaited them. However, some of the more sinister ones would rather kill them to force them to divulge some information. Before they were punished by the heavenly wrath, they still had a chance to dig out some information. Greed was boundless. It didn't matter if Yi Tianyun and the others lived or died. All they wanted was to dig out more martial arts. In that case, they are still planning to forcefully recruit people to a grade 2 god realm? Yi Tianyun asked. Yes. Our previous method was a little more violent. Some of them directly went down to recruit geniuses. At that time, you will have to participate in the Divine Domain War, the Divine Emperor Yuqin reminded. If you don't want to participate in the Divine Domain War, you have to keep a low profile. Didn't you say that the Divine Domain War would affect grade 2 god realms? Yi Tianyun asked. That's true. The Divine Emperor Yuqin nodded. If that's the case, even if I keep a low profile, won't I still be invaded by the flames of war if I stay in a grade 2 god realm? Yi Tianyun asked. This, depending on how remote the power is, there are some that won't be affected, the Divine Emperor Yuqin said. If that's the case, then there's a chance that I'll be affected. If that's the case, why should I hide and keep a low profile? Yi Tianyun shook his head. Then you can hide in a grade 1 god domain. That way, you won't be affected. The Divine Emperor Yuqin changed his words. Hiding in a grade 1 god domain. You might as well let me hide in Fanyu. That place definitely won't be affected. Yi Tianyun rolled his eyes at her and said, forget it, there's no need for that. Let nature take its course. The war of the divine realm, how could I miss out on something like this? Do you think that we cultivators can become stronger without experiencing these things? How can you think like that? If your cultivation is too low, you'll just become cannon fodder. The Divine Emperor Yuqin said in exasperation. If I'm taken to a grade 3 god domain, won't I be heavily groomed? Heavily groomed, I believe that in 1,000 years, with our strength, we can still occupy a place among the grade 3 god domains. Yi Tianyun looked at her and said, compared to being captured, I think it's better to come here personally to recruit disciples, right? The Divine Emperor Yuqin fell silent. This war was indeed going to happen 1,000 years later, or even 10,000 years later. At that time, their cultivation would have a huge breakthrough, and they would definitely not just be at the Earth Monarch realm. Indeed, no matter what, you can't join my sacred peak god domain. The Divine Emperor Yuqin said in a low voice, they will force you to become a slave and completely control you. Sacred peak god domain, Yi Tianyun's eyes narrowed, especially when he heard that he would be forced to become a slave. That sounded really chilling. That's right, it's the sacred peak god domain. If you were captured back then, you would only become a slave, and you wouldn't even be able to commit suicide. The Divine Emperor Yuqin said hatefully, they are just so overbearing, demanding absolute loyalty from their disciples, so they will force them to become slaves. Only those with a bit more value will not be forced to become slaves. Yi Tianyun frowned. It seemed that his choice to escape back then was a very good one. If he hadn't escaped, he would really have been turned into a slave. Of course, if he wanted to escape, those people wouldn't be able to stop him at all. With the teleportation divine stone and the teleportation divine stone, no one would be able to catch him, unless they set up a restriction that prevented him from escaping. You've been out for so long. If you can't find me, won't you be punished? Yi Tianyun asked. That won't happen. Anyway, I'm cultivating here, and breaking through to the next level is also my mission. The Divine Emperor Yuqin said, my biggest mission now is to restore my original peak cultivation, and then break through to the heavenly venerable realm. To them, this is the most important thing. Everything else isn't important. An additional Divine Lord was an extremely powerful helper. If there was an additional heavenly venerable, there was no need to even mention it. That person could become an elder, and have a very high status and influence. When you reincarnated, what was your cultivation level? Yi Tianyun continued to ask. Late Divine Lord. As for the specific details, I will have to fully awaken my memories to know. The Divine Emperor Yuqin shook his head and said, but no matter what, I have to participate in the Divine Realm War. This is my value to them. What was it that made you willing to serve them for 10,000 years? Yi Tianyun was a little interested in this. Reincarnated soul grass is very rare. Back then, I found one with great difficulty. I was waiting for it to mature and use it to reincarnate, but I was besieged by several powerhouses, so I was forced to retreat. By the time I returned, the reincarnated soul grass had already been taken away. The Divine Emperor Yuqin looked at Yi Tianyun and said, you should have guessed what happened next. My situation was very bad. Because I was in a hurry to break through to a higher level, my body was in a terrible state, and I could collapse at any time. The reincarnated soul grass was my last hope. Since the sacred peak realm of the gods took it out and made such a request, I couldn't possibly refuse. After I was reborn, when I awakened a little of my memories, I went to find the truth. I wanted to see who was surrounding me, and in the end, I discovered that it was the powerhouses of the sacred peak realm of the gods. But it was useless. I had already made a vow, and it was deeply engraved in my soul. I couldn't violate it. Unless the person I made the vow to dies, then I wouldn't have to fulfill it. The divine Emperor Yuqin looked up at Yi Tianyun, his eyes shining, but he immediately shook his head and said, "Forget it. I actually hoped that you could help me. The opponent is a divine lord powerhouse, and he is stronger than I was back then." Chapter 1133. Forget it. Just focus on your cultivation. You won't listen to me anyway. The divine territory war is so scary, yet you still have the mood to go. The divine Emperor Yuqin suspected that Yi Tianyun had gone mad. Most cultivators tried to hide, but Yi Tianyun still wanted to try. It was undeniable that the resources in the third-grade divine territory were amazing. But then again, they threw so many resources at you to work for them. This is the only way to become stronger, isn't it? Yi Tianyun smiled. If you keep hiding in a corner, you won't be able to become stronger. Moreover, even if you can escape this divine territory war, what about next time? Unless you hide forever, you will always be affected. Even if you don't join any divine territory forces, the divine territory war will affect too many forces. Unless you keep hiding, you will definitely be affected one day. Alright, I've been convinced by you. These are all your thoughts. Just don't join the sacred peak divine territory. It's the most disgusting divine territory. After the divine Emperor Yuqin finished speaking, he shook his head. It's about time. I should leave this place. Take care. Thank you for your reminder. I will keep it in mind. Yi Tianyun nodded. The divine Emperor Yuqin's information was very useful. At least this way, if the sacred peak divine territory came to recruit, he would definitely not join. Celestial Lord Yuqin looked at him from head to toe and said with emotion, "You are the only one among all the cultivators I've met who can maintain a passionate heart. I hope you can keep going. Speaking of which, you are now my junior brother. Why don't you call me senior sister?" "Well, I think my results are better than yours. I should be the senior brother, right?" Yi Tianyun shrugged. He would not call the divine Emperor Yuqin senior sister. "I'm older than you." The divine Emperor Yuqin glared at him. "Cultivators don't measure their age, right?" Yi Tianyun looked at her and smiled. "Moreover, you are a woman. Are you sure it's good to say that you are older than others?" As long as it was a woman, even if she was a cultivator, she would not be willing to reveal her age. The divine Emperor Yuqin, on the other hand, claimed that he was older than Yi Tianyun in order to fight for the position of senior sister. "I like it, what do you think?" The divine Emperor Yuqin looked at him with eyes full of ridicule. He even crooked his finger and said, "Come, call me senior martial sister twice." "You want me to call you senior sister?" Yi Tianyun shook his head and smiled. "That's impossible. Unless you break through to the Empyrean realm first, don't make me call you senior sister. On the other hand, if I break through to the heavenly venerable level before you, then you can call me senior brother. How about it? You will break through to the Empyrean realm before me?" The divine Emperor Yuqin looked at him and laughed. "How is that possible? I admit that your abilities are not weak. In fact, you are even stronger than me now. However, that is because my memories have not been completely awakened. If he awakens his memories, his cultivation speed will definitely be far inferior to mine. I have the experience of a god lord. I am only one step away from breaking through to the Empyrean realm. Unless you are also a reincarnated god lord, there is no way you can beat me." Yi Tianyun shrugged and said, "Then, are you willing to make a bet with me? The Divine Emperor Yuqin was right. However, he had the system, so he did not feel any pressure at all. Currently, there was some pressure. That was to break through to the 10th refining Earth Lord. He needed some standards to break through. This was a little difficult, but he believed that it would not take too long to solve. No problem, let's bet. The Divine Emperor Yuqin smiled. If you beat me, not only will I call you senior martial brother, I will even marry you. There is no need to marry me. Just call me senior martial brother. Yi Tianyun waved his hand. He already had Shi Xuan, so he did not dare to have second thoughts. You are quite arrogant. Do you think I like marrying you? I just want to make it clear that I will not lose. Celestial Yuqin looked at him angrily and said, and you're really unlikable. I'm liked by so many people. Even if you don't like me, you should at least give me some face. Cough cough, that is not the problem. Your charm is not small, and you are talented. It is just that I have a wife. Naturally, I have to be strict. Yi Tianyun explained. Oh, that is really rare. Men like you should have 3 or 4 wives. You have changed my view. The Divine Emperor Yuqin looked at him as if he was looking at a rare animal. He smiled and said, it is really rare to see someone as loyal as you. I admire you very much. At least you are not like those stinky men who have 3 or 4 wives. If there is no benefit, I will dump you in the blink of an eye. You are really rare. There are very few geniuses like you who only have 1 wife. The Divine Emperor Yuqin shook his head. He felt that Yi Tianyun was really a weirdo. Men had 3 or 4 wives. Mainly, male cultivators were the majority. Naturally, they could have 3 or 4 wives. Especially talented cultivators, they would definitely have more incense. It was very normal for them to have 3 or 4 wives. They should hurry and have more children. It is all right. Yi Tianyun hurriedly waved his hand and said, let's not talk about this topic. I already know the general situation. That is the bet. Let's see who can break through to the heavenly venerable rank first. No problem. The Divine Emperor Yuqin looked at him and smiled. It is good to know you. The world of the divine territory is full of changes. I hope that the next time we meet, we will still be alive. Yi Tianyun was stunned. This Divine Emperor Yuqin was really a little pessimistic. But he really could not blame her for being pessimistic. In such a chaotic world, those with weak cultivation were like ants. They could be easily crushed. They were just struggling at death's door. After speaking, the Divine Emperor Yuqin flew away. She did not stay here for long. Yi Tianyun looked at her leaving figure and was silent for a while. Then, he found a place to meditate and cultivate. He started to absorb the experience here. Although he could not condense a core, it was not a big problem to fill up the experience first. The jade pendant he had could last for another 2 months. With so much time, it was not a problem to fill up the experience. Then, he found a safe place and casually sat down to absorb the experience. As time passed, after he absorbed crazily for more than half a month, a pleasant voice was finally heard. Ding! Congratulations to player Yi Tianyun for successfully reaching the experience required to level up. Do you want to choose to break through to the Lord of Heaven now? No need. Yi Tianyun did not even think about it and directly rejected. He wanted to break through to the 10 refining Earth Lord. Just breaking through to the Lord of Heaven was not enough to satisfy him. Core, I am just missing a core. Yi Tianyun looked around to see if there was a core here. To build more cores in one's body, the simplest and crudest way was to absorb another core, just like before. Chapter 1134. As Yi Tianyun carefully examined his surroundings, he quickly discovered that there was an incomparably huge core buried deep underground. It would be impossible to say that there was no core here. The sky-pilfering sacred ground absorbed all the energy in the surroundings, including the core, and continuously condensed it to make the sky-pilfering sacred ground even stronger. Perhaps the sky-pilfering sacred ground wasn't the best, but the core was the most important thing for him. There is indeed a core, but it will be quite difficult to go down. Tianyun squinted. The sky-pilfering sacred ground had been blessed by vast heavenly venerate, so it would be quite difficult to break the restrictions set up by vast heavenly venerate. Even a heavenly venerate might not be able to break it. If it was so easy to break, the sky-pilfering sacred ground would have been occupied long ago. How could there still be a spirit consciousness here? Although it was difficult, one shouldn't forget that vast heavenly venerate had transmitted his own energy to them. Even if he couldn't dig out the core, he could at least get close to it. Soon after, he did not do anything else. He immediately took out a weapon, aimed at the ground, and began to madly dig. However, just as he dug a small hole, it started filling up rapidly, as if it had an extremely strong healing ability. This allowed him to quickly fill up the hole he dug. He simply didn't have time to dig any further. This healing speed was even faster than his digging speed. What the hell? Is this place that hard to break? Tianyun frowned. At this rate, if he continues to dig, he will be buried in the ground. Of course, this wasn't too difficult for him. He would be able to come out with a teleportation. Looks like I have to put in more effort. Although it's a little troublesome, at least I can go down. Tianyun started digging frantically, his speed increasing several times. A decent reincarnation level weapon was reduced to a shovel, and it kept digging crazily. The soil that he dug up was directly moved into his inventory. He originally wanted to move it into his inner world, but he couldn't, so he could only move it into his inventory. After the teleportation, he began to dig frantically again. Under his rapid digging, he managed to dig a path down. However, the back of the path was quickly filled up, trying to wrap him up. Tianyun wanted to give it a try. He wanted to see if it was faster to wrap the soil or if he could dig faster. From the looks of it now, he was the one who dug faster. However, the path behind was blocked bit by bit. If it were anyone else, they would not be able to continue digging. After all, the soil that was dug out had to be pushed to one side. But there was no way back, and he couldn't stuff it into his storage space, so he couldn't dig at all. Only his special inventory was able to store the soil. He had to admit that this soil was very precious. After he left this place, he would try to transfer it into his inner world. Master, what are you doing? Cui Cui transformed and appeared beside him, curious about what he was doing. Can't you see? I'm digging a hole. It's just that the soil behind me is a little troublesome. It keeps moving closer, Tianyun explained as he dug. So that's how it is. It's very simple. I'll help Master block it. As she spoke, Cui Cui released a burst of light. The healing ability of the surrounding began to slow down and even stopped. When Tianyun saw this, he was stunned. You still have this ability? Of course, I can revive withered elixirs, but at the same time, I can also absorb the vitality around me. Cui Cui smiled proudly. Master, don't you think I'm amazing? Not bad at all. Tianyun was very surprised. This way, he wouldn't have to rush. Especially in the later stages, he couldn't even sit down and absorb it. He had to absorb it while digging. With Cui Cui's help, the surrounding soil no longer healed quickly, which made him feel much more relaxed. After digging wildly all the way, he successfully reached the core at the bottom. This place was indeed filled with restrictions. They were densely packed, and each of them was very profound. The most important thing was the power of a celestial venerable. This was the most difficult to break. If one wanted to break the restrictions, it would take a little effort at most. However, a celestial venerable's power could easily send one flying if one attacked casually. If it was serious, it could even directly crush the intruder and cause him to explode. Tianyun looked up and down at the thick energy. It was no different from what he had imagined. It was all Celestial Venerable's power. Very good, let's start analyzing. Tianyun's appraisal. I began to analyze the fluctuations of the energy. He wanted to thoroughly integrate with this energy. Soon, he roughly analyzed it. It was no different from the ones he had encountered before. Immediately, Tianyun stretched out his hand and his whole body drilled into the energy. After passing through the energy layer, the first thing that came into view was the gigantic core, which possessed an extremely vast amount of life force. Compared to the life cores he had encountered before, this was dozens of times stronger. The energy it contained was even purer and more astonishing. Not bad, it's here. After entering, Tianyun sat down in meditation and began to absorb this core. Tsuetsue was next to him. When she saw this thing, her eyes lit up and she also began to absorb crazily. One big and one small, they both sat down to absorb the core's energy without holding back. After Tianyun absorbed it, this pure core's energy began to flow into his body. Under the influence of his star power, the surroundings gradually condensed into planets and gathered bit by bit. If he wanted to keep 2 planets in his body, he had to first achieve a state where they didn't conflict. This was a life core to begin with. Now that he was absorbing a life core, it was rare for there to be a conflict at the same level. If it was a fire element core, he wouldn't be able to absorb it. Fortunately, this wasn't a fire element core. Otherwise, he would have come here for nothing. However, before Tianyun came down, he knew that it wouldn't be a fire element core. It wasn't because of the appraisal eye, but because there were so many elixirs around and the rich vitality. How could it be a fire element core? In this state, he gathered bit by bit and the planets in his body began to form slowly. Everything seemed to be going smoothly. Very soon, not too much time was needed, and a huge planet was successfully formed in his body. When he was about to continue strengthening it, the original life core began to shake and the entire world in his body showed signs of collapsing. What's going on? Chapter 1135. Tianyun thought that everything would go smoothly. He did not expect that it would not go smoothly at all. It could even be said that it was very bad. The original world in his body began to collapse rapidly. It was obvious that if it continued to accumulate, it would cause a conflict. When that happened, the 2 planets would explode. When that happened, his body would directly explode. Even if he did not die, he would become a cripple. Without the world in his body, it was equivalent to his cultivation being crippled. He would have to start over again. Immediately, he made a prompt decision and immediately shattered the condensed planets, turning them into countless amounts of life energy that circulated in his body. Very quickly, the original life core absorbed them and expanded rapidly, becoming incomparably huge. After absorbing so much life core energy, how could it not expand? However, this meant that it had failed. It was a complete failure. Originally, he thought that under the situation where the attributes were the same, it was impossible for him to fail. It was very simple to condense a planet. Who knew that he was wrong? It was not that simple. It won't work at all. Planets with the same attributes cannot coexist. Tianyun frowned, trying to figure out what exactly had gone wrong. After thinking carefully, he suddenly slapped his thigh, startling Tsuetsue so much that she jumped up. What's wrong? What happened? Tsuetsue stared at him blankly. She had no idea what had happened. Nothing. Tsuetsue, can you still cultivate here? Tianyun saw that her entire body was emitting a green light. It seemed that her condition was not bad. After absorbing the life core here, her body had evolved. However, this evolution process was extremely long. It was impossible for her to advance after nurturing here for a period of time. She had stayed here for so long, but she had not evolved. It was impossible for her to advance after staying here for a period of time. Of course I can. I love this kind of rich life energy. It's so comfortable to cultivate, Tsuetsue said. But master, why did you make such a big fuss just now? I just thought of something and suddenly shouted. Continue cultivating. Tianyun gestured for her to sit down. Only then did Tsuetsue sit down again and continue cultivating. Naturally, what Tianyun was thinking about was the matter of condensing a planet. Without a doubt, condensing a second life planet was extremely undesirable. After failing, he thought of a relatively simple solution, which was to change the attribute. The life core was actually equivalent to the wood element. If he wanted to condense a planet that would not restrain each other, he would have to choose the water element. This meant that he needed to find a water attribute core. If he condensed it like this, it would definitely not restrain each other. Instead, it might even complement each other. In the state of mutual promotion, there would definitely be no effect. He guessed that this situation was most likely because his inner world couldn't condense the same type of core. It needed to have a different attribute. If they were the same, they would repel each other. This was just like how a mountain couldn't contain two tigers. They definitely couldn't let one go, or else they would definitely be rejected. Water element core, huh? Tianyun frowned. He didn't even know where to find such a thing. There were many planets with cores, but they were all not weak sections. It was impossible for him to casually absorb the energy of the core. He thought for a while, and his eyes lit up. The Heavenly Spring Divine Realm. Maybe there is. The name wasn't randomly given. The Heavenly Spring Divine Realm might very well have a water element core. However, how to ask was another matter. I'll go ask after everything is over. Tianyun didn't choose to leave immediately. Instead, he continued to cultivate. Although he had enough experience, he could continue to accumulate, especially to strengthen the core in his body. Why was he in such a hurry to leave? The jade pendant on him could last for another 2 months. It wouldn't be too late to leave after he finished cultivating. In the next 2 months, he continued to absorb the core's energy crazily, constantly nourishing the planet in his body. Then, it grew bigger and bigger, looking many times bigger than before. After about 2 months, he felt that it was about time to leave, so he teleported out of the core area. At the same time, he set up a coordinate here. In the future, when he came back to cultivate, he could use the teleportation god stone to relax. He didn't need to continue digging. After coming out, before Tianyun prepared to leave, he thought for a while and finally put the jade pendant away. As soon as he put the jade pendant away, a violent devouring force sucked him out. Especially under his feet. It was as if something was pulling out the star power in his body. In the blink of an eye, a small part of Tianyun's star power was drained. Such a strong suction force. It's much more domineering than the martial arts I used before. Tianyun gasped. After trying it out, he immediately felt how strong the suction force was. No wonder even the Lord of Heaven couldn't resist it easily. As for divine lords, the effect of cultivating here wasn't great for them. Therefore, this place could easily suppress those below the Lord of Heaven. Without the jade pendant, one would really be sucked dry. Tianyun was now frozen on the ground. He couldn't even move a step. No wonder he had to leave before the effect of the jade pendant disappeared. Otherwise, he wouldn't even be able to escape. He would be sucked dry directly. When that happened, he would be sucked dry without being able to escape. It was really hopeless. Then, Tianyun quickly took out the jade pendant and covered himself with a shield to protect himself. Then, he could move his legs and move freely. It seems like I still can't resist it. Tianyun shook his head. He thought he could resist the devouring force, but it seemed like he couldn't for the time being. He had to break through again. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to resist the terrifying devouring force. After personally experiencing the suction, Tianyun didn't want to stay here any longer. When he left the heavenly thief's sacred land and flew in the direction of the teleportation formation, he immediately saw someone flying in his direction. From their clothes, it was obvious that they were guards of the heavenly spring's sacred land. Lord Tianyun, Elder Go Huang ordered me to wait for you here. He hopes that you can find him when you return, the guard explained. Yi Tianyun's eyes froze. It was obvious that the news had spread. He wasn't surprised that Elder Go Huang was looking for him. Okay, I'll go now, Yi Tianyun said. Please follow me. The guard was very respectful. It was obvious that he had also heard something. Experts with strength would always be respected by others. Chapter 1136. As soon as Yi Tianyun came out, he was immediately called to the elder. He was not surprised at all. The Purple Crown Lord of Heaven would definitely tell him when he went out. After all, he only had a month's time to stay. Now that he had such a long time, he definitely needed to go out and pass the message. Otherwise, everyone would think that Yi Tianyun had died inside. Naturally, he needed someone to pass the message. Under the guidance of the guard, he quickly returned to the heavenly spring holy realm. His journey was smooth, and he arrived at the Elder's temple. This was a very important place, and not just anyone could enter. With the guidance of the guard, he went straight to the heavenly spring holy realm. This is the Tianyun Lord that Elder Go Huang wants to see. Where is Elder Go Huang? The guard asked. The elders are having a meeting. But since you're here, I'll bring you over now. Another guard nodded and led Yi Tianyun inside. They're bringing me in for this meeting. Yi Tianyun was puzzled. Yes, you're the person that the elder wants. Even if it's a meeting, you have to be brought in. The guard thought about it and added, the elder said that you have to be brought in no matter the situation. Yi Tianyun nodded. It seemed that Elder Go Huang really valued him. But thinking about it, he could climb to the peak of the Heavenly Lord path. How could they not value him? If they didn't, they must have been kicked in the head by a donkey. Under the guidance of the guard, he walked into the main hall. He didn't see anyone, but the voices came from inside. This time, one of our human disciples has successfully ascended to the Heavenly Lord path. It seems that he has a high chance of becoming a Heavenly Lord in the future. You said it's possible. How did a human climb up the mountain? Does he have some special ability? I don't think so. Even if a human climbs to the Heavenly Lord path, it'll be hard for him to break through in the later stages. He'll still be stuck on the road, unable to move forward. How is it impossible? He's from our God Creation Palace. I've seen his ability. He's very strong. He won't have any pressure to become a Heavenly Lord. Yi Tianyun could tell that one of the voices belonged to Elder Dong Yun. As a member of the God Creation Palace, Elder Dong Yun would definitely come for the meeting. Plus, he was an elder. How could he not come? Go in. The guard did not care about the content of the conversation. Elder Go Huang's status was extremely high, and he would definitely be the leader. Immediately, Yi Tianyun lifted his foot and walked inside. As soon as he stepped through the door, all eyes gathered on him. To be honest, he felt a little awkward. He really didn't like walking in while others were discussing. Especially when the person in question was himself. This way, if he came in, there would definitely be a lively discussion, and it would be directed at him. Earth Lord Tianyun is here. Elder Go Huang's eyes lit up. They had been waiting for a long time, and finally, Yi Tianyun was here. They were in no hurry to start the meeting, but since Yi Tianyun hadn't come out for so long, they decided to bring it forward. The meeting was only halfway through, and Yi Tianyun had returned. He was pleasantly surprised. Those who didn't know Yi Tianyun got to know him again. They stared at him as though they wanted to see through him. Earth Lord Jiu Yen. One of the elders blurted out. At this time, the other elders were shocked. They had seen Earth Monarch Jill Yen before, but this was definitely the first time they saw a human Earth Monarch Jill Yen. Of course, it wasn't that Yi Tianyun was the only human who had broken through to the Earth Lord Jill Yen. It was just that they had only seen Yi Tianyun, the only human who had reached the Earth Lord Jill Yen level. It was evident that there were very few Earth Lords Jill Yen in the human race. The human race wasn't very talented, so few could reach the Earth Lord Jill Yen level. There were very few Earth Lords 8 Lien, let alone the Earth Lord Jill Yen level. Now, Yi Tianyun was standing in front of them. Not only had he completed the Heavenly Sovereign Path, but he had also broken through to the Earth Lord Jill Yen level. 2 halos surrounded him, and he was very eye-catching in the eyes of the elders. Especially Elder Shao Tian. His eyes were cold. He didn't think that the one who had angered him would be such a genius. Just these 2 halos were enough to crush many geniuses from the Heavenly Spring Divine Realm. They couldn't compare to him. It really is the Earth Lord Jill Yen level. How long has it been? You've already broken through to the Earth Lord Jill Yen level. Elder Dong Yun was pleasantly surprised. He had to say that Yi Tianyun had made him proud. He had just joined, and he had already achieved such a result. How could he not be surprised? This is all because of Elder Go Huang's care. If I didn't steal from the Heaven Divine Realm, I really wouldn't have been able to break through to the Earth Lord Jill Yen level. Yi Tianyun smiled and flattered. Not at all. Stealing the reward from the Heaven's sacred land was something that was promised to us. Everything is what you deserve. Elder Go Huang beamed with joy. I didn't expect you to break through again in such a short time. It's not easy to break through to the Earth Lord Jill Yen level. All the elders had changed their opinion of Yi Tianyun. The Earth Lord Jill Yen level was a golden signboard. It couldn't be bad. Even those with good talent might not be able to achieve it. This meant that those who broke through to the Earth Lord Jill Yen level, no matter how trashy their race was, couldn't be weak. Some elders who didn't think highly of the human race had ugly expressions. Especially Elder Shao Tian, who disliked the human race. But now was not the time to say anything sarcastic. Some things couldn't be refuted, such as the standard of the Earth Lord Jill Yen level. I heard that you completed the Heavenly Sovereign Path. What reward did you get? Elder Shao Tian went straight to the point. This was the most important thing to them. Although there were 8 geniuses who successfully passed the Heavenly Sovereign Path, the embarrassing thing was that none of them were from the Heavenly Spring Divine Realm. Even the other 4 Divine Realms didn't get any. Those were obtained by geniuses from the Grade 3 Divine Realms or by geniuses who paid a price to enter. To put it bluntly, Yi Tianyun was the first disciple from the Heavenly Spring Divine Realm to complete the Heavenly Sovereign Path. This honor was really enviable. I got a bit of martial arts inheritance. Yi Tianyun said with a half-truth. He couldn't say that he didn't get anything. With so many eyes watching, who would believe him if he said he didn't get anything? Especially when he used it in the future, people would definitely see through it. He might as well admit it. As long as he didn't say it, he would get 5 books. What is it? Quickly take it out and let me see. Elder Shao Tian's eyes lit up. Elder, it's impossible for this junior to take it out. When I received this inheritance, I swore an oath that I would absolutely not reveal it, Yi Tianyun replied in a neither servile nor overbearing manner. Chapter 1137. Yi Tianyun's explanation made many elders deeply feel that way. This kind of situation was not strange. If one could casually impart martial arts, one would know how many people obtained this inheritance just by looking at the names engraved on the cliff. If these people who obtained the inheritance could impart it, they would have already imparted this inheritance a long time ago. In fact, there was no news at all, proving that it could not be imparted to the outside. This indeed can't be imparted to the outside. Just roughly talk about the situation inside. Elder Go Huang was a little interested in the inner workings of the Heavenly Venerate Path. The other elders looked over one after another, their eyes all revealing some interest. Elder Xiao Tian's gaze became gloomy instead, as if thinking about something. Below, I encountered heavenly venerate vast expanses divine sense. It's roughly the meaning of recruiting disciples. Whoever can climb to the end and pass the test can become his in-name disciple. In the future, if one breaks through to heavenly venerate, they can become an official disciple, Yi Tianyun answered truthfully. This was not some secret. Moreover, if he did not say it out, they definitely would not believe it. He said that it was an impossible thing to go one round inside. Nobody would believe it. Heavenly venerate vast expanses in-name disciple, everyone sucked in a cold breath. Everyone exchanged glances. They did not expect that there was such a background there. Because they did not have a disciple climb to the end, they never knew the truth in this aspect. It was really a kind of tragedy. Heavenly venerate vast expanse, I've heard of this heavenly venerate before. He's an extremely famous heavenly venerate. Among so many heavenly venerates, not the strongest, but he can at least rank in the top 5. One of the elders said solemnly. Top 5 heavenly venerates, everyone's eyes constricted. Heavenly venerates were out of reach for them. Even if they broke through to heavenly venerate, they would at most be at the bottom level. Now, heavenly venerate vast expanse could actually rank in the top 5. This was still among all the known heavenly venerates. To be able to rank in the top 5, it was already not something that they could imagine. Heavenly venerates were already powerful enough. To be able to charge into the top 5, it could be seen that their strength was extremely formidable. Yi Tianyun's eyes narrowed. He did not expect that the background of this master of his would be so astonishing. The top 5 Empyrean existences could be said to be able to walk unhindered among Empyreans. So you're saying that the heaven-pilfering sacred ground was established by Empyrean vast expanse? Elder Go Huang and the others finally understood the situation. Yes, the heaven-pilfering sacred ground was created by Empyrean vast expanse. Moreover, among so many god realms, he didn't just place one heaven-pilfering sacred ground. Instead, he placed several heaven-pilfering sacred grounds in order to select disciples. Yi Tianyun explained. Only now did the elders suddenly realize what was going on. So there was actually such a situation. So that's how it is. Looks like you've already become heavenly premier vast expanses in-name disciple. The eyes of Elder Go Huang and the others lit up. Yes, this disciple has already become heavenly premier vast expanses disciple in name. However, this disciple still needs to break through to the heavenly premier vast expanses official disciple, Yi Tianyun said. So you're only an in-name disciple. I thought you were already an official disciple. You're only an in-name disciple. As long as you haven't broken through to the heavenly premier vast expanse, you can't be considered an official disciple. What a waste of time. Elder Xiao Tian leaned against his chair, feeling disdainful. The difference between an in-name disciple and an official disciple was too big. The life and death of an in-name disciple had nothing to do with Empyrean vast expanse. It meant that if he couldn't even find his master, how could he rely on him? Only official disciples could enjoy such treatment. If he became an official disciple, he could do whatever he wanted. Yi Tianyun's eyes flashed. He smiled and said, yes, this disciple is slow-witted. Through hard work, I barely became an in-name disciple. I became the first junior in the Heavenly Spring Divine Realm to reach the finish line and become an in-name disciple. Impudent. Elder Xiao Tian's face darkened. He slammed the table and said angrily, what do you mean by that? Yi Tianyun's words had a hidden meaning. An in-name disciple didn't have a backer, but at least he was the number 1 person in the Heavenly Spring Divine Realm. It was better than Elder Xiao Tian's side. If none of them reached the finish line, wouldn't they be even more trash? Pfft. Elder Dong Yun suddenly laughed. He looked at Elder Xiao Tian and said, Elder Xiao Tian, I was asking you what you meant by that. So what if you're an in-name disciple? At least you received a heavenly venerate's inheritance. In the future, you will have a chance to become a heavenly venerate. And Elder Shao Tian, the in-name disciples that you said aren't worth mentioning, I wonder how many of your disciples can reach the finish line. Elder Dong Yun couldn't help but quarrel with Elder Shao Tian. Yi Tianyun was his disciple. He would definitely side with his own disciple. Moreover, ordinary people couldn't receive such an honor, and Elder Shao Tian was still mocking him. If his disciple completed the heavenly venerate path, he would have told everyone. How could he still feel bored? Elder Dong Yun, I'm just stating the facts. Do you think it's easy to become a heavenly venerate? Even if you receive a heavenly venerate's inheritance, you might not be able to break through. Elder Shao Tian said coldly. That's true. At least compared to others, you have a greater chance. Elder Dong Yun similarly retorted coldly. Alright, stop arguing. Elder Go Huang looked at them and said in a solemn voice, making a ruckus here, where's the propriety? Being able to obtain an heavenly venerate's inheritance is already pretty good. Looks like we have to increase our grooming efforts and let our disciples walk the heavenly venerate path. When they reach the end, they can obtain an heavenly venerate's inheritance. What a pity. If we could walk, that would be for the best. Divine Lord cultivation could not walk the heavenly venerate path. The heavenly venerate path similarly had restrictions. If the cultivation was too high, there was no way to walk it. If they could walk it, they could probably walk the heavenly venerate path. Elder Shao Tian's eyes lit up. In that case, we can all get a little more of the distribution on the jade pendant? Elder Shao Tian, didn't you say that you weren't interested previously? Isn't it just an in-name disciple and not an official disciple? What's the use of taking it? Elder Dong Yun circled back to the topic. Elder Shao Tian's expression was livid, and he said in a solemn voice, Elder Dong Yun, I'm thinking for my disciples. Didn't Elder Go Huang say just now that even if it's an in-name disciple, it's at least in heavenly venerate's inheritance? I want to let my disciples see the world. Could it be that I can't? Yi Tianyun shook his head repeatedly as he listened by the side. This Elder Shao Tian was sour enough. When it was his turn to have a chance, he was like a dog, pouncing over immediately. Fine. Everything is up to you. Elder Dong Yun shot a glance over at Yi Tianyun and nodded at him, indicating that with him around, he absolutely would not let Yi Tianyun suffer any grievances. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.